Oh.
All right, please, let's go ahead and take our seats. We'll get started.
Everybody, seats, please.
Please take your seats. I know, I forgot it. What's that?
Are you getting ready? He's
Well, I'm going to make you stand up again so you can get exercise. All right, good morning and welcome to the February meeting of the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council. Welcome and thank you all for attending. Again, if you haven't signed in and you're a board member, please make sure you link up with Carrie. We want to make sure we capture all of the board members that were here today. With that, I'm going to turn to Hugh to lead us in the pledge.
And please, flags in the back.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Hugh. You may be seated. All right, all the board members should have received the information for the meeting, including today's agenda. I believe there's also copies at the back of the room for those members of the public or others that need that. I would like to ask the board to look any comments, changes, and I'm seeking approval for today's meeting agenda. Any comments or adjustments to the agenda from the board?
Motion to approve. Second.
All right, all those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye. All right, any opposition? All right, I've already got folks in the chat giving thumbs up there. So today's agenda is approved. Thank you. Item number 5 on the consent agenda are the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes went out with the board packet. Any comments or adjustments to the minutes from the January board meeting? Oh, sorry, I couldn't say. It's hard for me to see down there. Oh, yes, thank you.
I think Terry has already corrected, right? But
I won't hear.
okay, but it was the Casuma's River boundary adjustment for the SOFAR cohesive strategy group. And I can't remember what it said in the minutes, but we fixed that, right?
Right, yeah, it will be in the final, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding us, David. David had indicated a correction to the minutes when it went out, which is what we would hope folks would do. So Carrie has that. Any other adjustments or corrections to the minutes from last month?
Just that David Soto observant.
Hey, at least one of us reads the minutes, right? That's and thank you, David. All right, with that, looking for a motion to approve. Second. Second from David. Any comments? All right, all those in favor of approving signify by saying aye. Got a thumbs up from Sherry online. Any opposition? Okay, the minutes from the January board meeting are approved with the adjustment as indicated by David. Okay, moving into new business, we've got a number of things today. One is a presentation on the defensible space program, the ordinance, the county ordinance for defensible space. Number of changes being proposed there, and we want to talk about that and have a presentation from the working group. But we have on our new business to look at and ratify or move forward with provide direction to the PAT to move forward with entering into a contract for the hazardous tree removal program. And then, of course, I know that we have a lot of discussion relative to grants, et cetera. So what I would like to do to keep us moving through the agenda and make sure that we have time for all of this is we're going to any discussion relative to the grants and the process and all of that, we're going to make sure we cover under item 8, under committee reports. Pat and a number of other folks have some things to report on and discuss there. So I would ask everybody to defer those discussions until we get to item 8. That will also give us an opportunity to hear from all of our partners, et cetera, prior to that. So if folks need to step out before we get to that, we have a chance to hear their reports before we do that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sue Henneke from the County Chief Administrator's Office to one, provide a report on the Office of Wildfire Preparedness, but also introduce the the presentation on defensible space since it's falling within that program.
I know we have the. I have to get back, but I will be here monthly for that update, and I'm happy to hang out for the whole meeting. So just real quick, I'll give you a little update on things we talked about last time. We are continuing to work on our strategy, our countywide strategy. That's going very well. The group had a workshop a couple of weeks ago and made some good progress. So we're getting really close to having a draft of that ready for everyone to look at. Our HMDP grant is with FEMA. So we're waiting to hear about that any day, but we are working with the Cal OES folks on getting all the administrative stuff out of the way, really in anticipation that we are going to receive that grant. So I think that's really good news. We are still working on finding staff for the office. So that's a challenge I know everywhere. So it will be going out for recruitment hopefully here in the next few weeks. And so if you know anybody that send them my way. The task groups, the working groups that I touched on last. So we've got our public outreach working group kicked off just this week with Jeff Hogue stepping up and helping to lead that effort for us. And I think that was going to come together really well. Our GIS data hub is still moving along. The surveyor's office is getting very close to having their first shot at a public safety interactive site. And so we're gonna beta test getting this new software that they have, and they're creating for us. I'll be able to go in and pull some information down. Looking forward to that in the next maybe month or two. And then finally, the defensible space working group, really what we're here to talk about today. They've been doing working really hard on reviewing the ordinance. They've been meeting every 2 weeks. We had amazing participation from all the agencies and Cal Fire, the state office, state fire marshal, county council at the county, Captain Shepherd there. We had a really good participation from the group, and I think we made some really good changes, hoping to streamline that process and to include some of the items from the wish list and the ordinance was originally adopted by critical. So with that, I will hand it over to our working group lead, Ron Phillips, to walk you through those proposed changes.
And give me just a second here, Ron, because we've got the most technically challenged person running the PowerPoint. So hang on. That's me. Let's see.
I think the microphone, Ken, just to correct, is just for the online folks.
That is correct.
Speak here, so hopefully everybody, Chris, you can hear me okay back over?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Alice over there looks like she can. No, okay, well, I'll try to speak as loud as possible. First off, I'm Ron Phillips. I represent the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. But I'm also on the advisory committee representing the county fire prevention officers. So for the last couple of years, I've been supporting the county in its efforts try to find the strategies that could work for all of us here in this county to reduce the wildfire risk, specifically after the Caldor fire in 21, but also even last year with the Mosquito fire. There were lessons learned from both of those large fires that I think it's safe to say we can all apply here in this county going forward. The presentation, and it looks like Ken, my technical advisor here, is presentation. Hoping that maybe we could pause all of the questions to the end. That way we can get everybody's questions at one time. So let me go through the presentation, and then we'll also then ask or answer questions after that. I should start by saying the advisory committee, and Ken, next slide if possible. As Sue alluded to, the advisory committee was formed in September of 2022. It was identified as an area, an ordinance, I should say, was identified as an area that the members of the advisory committee felt should be reviewed and looked at closely. And so that group, the working group that I lead, was formed in September of last year. It today is made up of 20 active members that are a broad range of professional experts in wildfire mitigation. They include, as Sue alluded to, the county itself. We've got really good representation from OWAPR and County Council on the committee. We have representation from CAL FIRE here at the local level. Both Megan and Jeff here in the room today are active participants. We actually are very fortunate. We also have representation from folks from the Office of the State Fire Marshal's office, excuse me, that oversee at the state level the wildfire mitigation efforts. So they've been very active. Participation by both of our cities. We're very fortunate that representation from both the city of Placerville and the city of South Lake Tahoe have been very active and engaged. Local fire district participation. We have four or 5 members now that represent the local fire districts. We have a representation from the Tahoe Conservancy. We have representation from county planning staff who look very closely at the CEQA implications of anything that this ordinance might touch. So they've been very helpful. And we've got several others. Chief Counsel from the Fire State Council is representing all of you in this effort. So we overall in the last 6 months, the membership has continued to grow. We've met 12 times to date to look at the county's draft ordinance, along with some other inspection practice efforts and training efforts and things like that associated with defensible space. In that period of time, we've put in about 500 staff hours, plus or minus, to look at the ordinance. We're actually up to now version 12 of a draft document to potentially bring to the Board of Supervisors this spring to look at changes to the ordinance. So we've got probably 75 plus or minus proposed changes to the existing county defensible space ordinance for the board's consideration. So there's a very large effort here. I should say that much of this effort originates in and around the county's efforts to establish a defensible space ordinance that's actually more restrictive than state law. That's in essence what the county's ordinance, which was adopted in 2019, created, is a situation where the county's efforts were more restrictive than even that required by either Public Resource Code 4291, which is the state defensible space standard, or its companion law, Government Code Section 51182, which applies to the cities and to a couple areas within Cameron Park and in Colorado Hills. But for the most part, here in this county, Public Resource Code 4291 is the minimum standard, except where the county's efforts have stepped in. The county first created its ordinance in 2019. It made some minor adjustments to the ordinance again in 2021, prior to the Caldor fire, and then it was suggested edits to the ordinance are approved by the board, and the most significant revamp of that ordinance would take place this year. The group that has been meeting really looked at 4 key areas as far as defensible space here in the county and the efforts that we were doing. The first is we collectively, one of the first things we started to do was we performed what's called a SWOT analysis. We looked at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities that exist in the county, and the threats from having a defensible space ordinance. So we looked at what each of those factors might lead to. If we, as an example, if we kept the ordinance as is, what would be the potential threats, or what are the opportunities? And if we made changes to the document, what potentially could be created out of that as well. Simultaneously, we also recognized that there was another ordinance that the county has that was silent on the issue of defensible space that we felt needed to address defensible space, and that's the vacation home rental ordinance that exists. There are approximately 1,000 plus or minus homes here in the county that are rented out as vacation home rentals, a large percentage of them in the Tahoe Basin, but we also certainly have them here on the West Slope. Those rental homes were not required to comply with the county's ordinance prior to a vacation home rental permit being issued. And so we've been working with the planning and building folks as well on closing that gap in that ordinance to require that as well. We, as I mentioned, have been working hard at looking at potential changes to the defensible space ordinance, which I'll cover in more detail here in a minute. And then, certainly the challenge of inspecting every property here in the county for defensible space compliance is well known. There are about 85,000 plus or minus parcels that exist today with structures on them, principally residential dwellings, but we certainly have commercial, industrial, and other types of buildings and uses that exist on lands here in the county. Even with the efforts today from CAL FIRE to perform defensible space inspections, even with the efforts of the county and the efforts of the local fire districts, today we're still, I think it's safe to say, probably less than 1% of all properties are inspected on with the base here in the county. So to realistically work with homeowners and property owners, it's going to take a village. It's going to take the involvement of the fire safety council. It's going to take involvement of community volunteers, other efforts to try to get the word out. Where we have reached out and worked with homeowners, we've had pretty good success. In the last 2 years, as an example, we've been doing defensible space inspections in the Diamond Springs and El Dorado Hills area, and in rescue, I should say. And in those communities where we have been doing defensible space inspections, we're seeing success rates of 80% plus. So we're getting good compliance from homeowners because most homeowners want to do the right thing. They actually want to try to make their property fire safe. And so working with them, we've actually had pretty good success rates. But again, we're only touching about 1% of all properties anymore. So that was one of the big focuses, is how do we enhance our education and outreach efforts through inspections or evaluations, home assessments and the like going forward. And then finally, we recognized that there was some inconsistency in the enforcement of the ordinance by the agencies that were enforcing the ordinance. We recognize that there were some questions in the ordinance that were left unanswered in the original document when it was first created. So we've been spending a lot of time looking at our inspection practices, and you and I will talk about the upcoming training that we have available here in a little bit for the fire safety council members if they're interested. Next slide, Ken. So the ordinance itself, you may hear it described in a variety of different ways. I think most people recognize they call it the Defensible Space Ordinance. I've heard people describe it as Ordinance 5101, which was the enacting ordinance approved by the Board of Supervisors back in 2019. Actually, it exists in El Dorado County Code Chapter 8.09. That's where it's actually found if you're looking for the legal requirements. That's the place it's housed. But it covers generally, probably 4 or 5 very broad areas and concepts. The first really is the administrative provisions that exist in the ordinance. Not only the reasons why the ordinance exists because it's more restrictive, but what happens if there's a conflict between that ordinance and another one which applies. Also provisions regarding what are called findings. So the Board of Supervisors, before they can enact a more restrictive requirement related to defensible space, they actually have to justify that. They have to create what are local findings that support and document the reasons why you're a community that has a more restrictive defensible space standard than existing in state law. So we've spent a lot of time looking at that, not only because it's necessary by the law, but also because it's also required under CEQA. Whenever you do environmental work or work on lands, you have to be cognizant of CEQA. CEQA has some very specific findings as well that you must demonstrate. So we've worked on both of those to try to strengthen that argument. Another area that we work a lot on, and I'll touch on in a minute, is definitions. So there was a lot of ambiguity in terms that were used in the ordinance and what they truly meant and how they were to be applied. So things like what is a structure was broadly interpreted differently depending on the area of the county that you were working in. So we tried to clean that up a little bit, clarify specifically some very specific areas of concern with the term used.
Give me 1 second. Just keep chatting, Ron, and I'm going to try to fix it for the online folks. It's not advancing for them.
Everybody still hear me okay in the room?
Are you gonna address how homeowners who are selling their home can comply with this ordinance?
Yes. We are gonna talk a little bit about real estate transactions.
Okay, I think we got it now. Thank you.
Can't go back to the
You got it.
prior slide just real quick.
Okay.
So we looked, in addition to the administrative section and the definitions found in the ordinance, we also looked very closely at the specific defensible space criteria. We found generally that the criteria was solid. We are fully aware that there are some changes in state law that will affect the ordinance going forward, such as the timber zone requirements that will probably be out later this year, we suspect. And so we modified the format just a little bit. Previously, there were very specific provisions found in the ordinance that basically mirrored the minimum standards of state law. So what we've done is basically removed all of that, or proposing to remove all of that, and instead to simply reference the fact that we're following the current provisions found in Public Resource Code 4291. So that way, when state law changes, we're not having to go back to the ordinance every time and revamp it to make sure it's consistent or more restrictive. So we've done that. One new area of the ordinance that we're proposing relates to the issue of what is defined as critical infrastructure. So places such as hospitals, radio communication sites, hazardous material sites, schools, especially private schools, areas that are at higher risk during a wildfire, especially during evacuation. We wanted to look closely at what we could do to harden and make resilient those areas so that we did not have to face what many communities have seen. As an example, both in Paradise during the Camp Fire and Tubbs Fire down in Santa Rosa, they had to undergo massive evacuations of the local hospitals because the fire was threatening those facilities. So what we've done is we've looked at certain critical infrastructure sites and proposed certain additional requirements for those facilities. And then finally, a big chunk of our efforts in the last 6 months has been looking at the enforcement process. And Ted Woods, who's from County Council, has been instrumental in helping us to streamline that process and make it more effective going forward. Certainly, I think that's been one of the challenges that the county has faced in the last 2 years. Is trying to get through the cumbersome enforcement process that exists in the law today. So we've tried to streamline that and make it more effective and give the county and others some specific tools to help them with that. I don't see Ted in the room today, but if he was here or if he shows up, I'll certainly refer to him. If not, I'll try to answer those questions more slowly. Next slide. So we looked at, again, under the administrative provisions, we looked at the ordinance title. So the official title of the ordinance today is Vegetation Management and Defensible Space. There was a lot of confusion around the term vegetation management because that generally applies to large landscape level requirements, not necessarily the requirements for individual homeowners. So we're proposing a change, which I'll cover here in just a second. There's also a new section under the admin provisions related to code conflicts. So again, where there are other codes, and there are other codes related to defensible space that exist, as well as other codes and standards in the county that, even though they don't directly cite defensible space, have implications on defensible space. So an example being, like we just mentioned a second ago, the vacation home rental ordinance. So we did add some language in the ordinance to address that. So that where there is a code conflict, it's clear which is the dominant or the provisions that apply most related to the space. We enhanced the finding section, which I'll speak in a second. We covered the definitions. We addressed CEQA a little bit more robustly, I should say. And again, thanks to CAL FIRE and their assistance in that, along with County Council and with the Planning and Building Department. We were worried that there could be a CEQA argument made under the current ordinance if we didn't actually enhance that provision as well. So we've done some work in that area. And next slide, Ken. Let's talk about the ordinance title. So the group is recommending to the board that the title of the ordinance actually be changed to hazardous vegetation and defensible space. So that would be the official title. Hazardous vegetation is clearly the focus here. Our efforts here in the county are focused within 100 feet traditionally, and specifically it relates to what is a hazard both to the property and to the occupants. Should that vegetation become on fire. So we're proposing a change in the title of the ordinance itself to reflect the actual condition that we're trying to communicate. Next slide. I mentioned significant work in the findings section that was necessary to justify having a more restrictive requirement than state law. There are now a total of 11 findings. Previously, there were, I think, 5 or 6. We've increased that to 11. Including 6 new findings that talk specifically about the fact that the fire hazard severity zone map in the county has changed significantly, as we've seen just recently, that we've been exposed to a number of large fires in the last few years, and that the state is seeing fires more frequently that are large scale, and we expect that condition we expect that to continue. There were also provisions in there that talk a little bit about the impact to the community from climate change and the fact that we're seeing warmer and drier summers and fall and springs that's leading to larger fires here in the county. We've also modified 2 of the other findings that exist to just clarify here at the local level what the current condition is that we encountered. Next. We're proposing adding 9 additional definitions to the document, or to the ordinance, I should say. Probably the ones that are of most interest to you is we define what a critical infrastructure facility or site is. Because again, we're proposing new provisions related to that area. We've also defined who the responsible person is. There was some ambiguity in the prior ordinance, or I should say the current ordinance, as to who is actually responsible to perform the defensible space, especially if you're dealing with properties that have, let's say, are rentals. Is it the obligation of the landowner? Is it the obligation of the renter? We've also clarified that, in fact, there are commercial and industrial facilities here in the county that need to meet the defensible space requirements, and who the responsible person is there is important. Next slide. So who is the responsible person now for properties in the county? So if I'm a homeowner, I'm clearly responsible for maintaining my property, right? But if I'm a government agency, am I required to comply with the ordinance? Because under state law, interestingly enough, there is no requirement that government-owned land, specifically local government owned, have to comply with Public Resource Code 4291. In fact, in state law, there's no requirement for any government agency to comply with PRC 4291. So we wanted to address that here in our local ordinance to clarify that, in fact, government-owned lands and properties are required to comply with the ordinance. Now, there are some exceptions. Federal and state-owned lands are not required because we have no legal authority to require them to comply with the county's ordinance. But local government entities such as school districts, fire districts, water districts, and other type of local government entities, including the county itself, are required to comply with this ordinance. And so we clarified that here first with the term who is a responsible person, and then we later on clarified even further in the requirements that those agencies need to comply with it as well. School districts are an interesting subject because, again, schools certainly, as we saw in the Caldor fire, have been lost in fires, and we certainly believe that they should comply with the county's ordinance. But the challenge is under state law, public school districts are viewed as quasi-state entities, so they can claim that they're exempt from local requirements. But we believe we can actually work with the local school districts here to get them to comply with the county's requirements without actually having to force the specific provisions on them. Next slide. Another definition that we've spent a lot of time discussing is what is a structure? Because again, the ordinance today seems to leave it open that It may not apply to certain types of structures that we traditionally find on private lands, including barns and storage sheds and accessory structures and things like that. So we have clarified the definition of structure to include all of those types of uses. And it's basically today, under this proposal, would exempt only those structures that are less than 120 square feet in size. So the small little outbuildings would not be required to comply with the ordinance, but all other structures do. Next slide. As it relates to the defensible space provisions themselves and the requirements for defensible space, again, we basically removed or are proposing to remove all of those specific subsections that exist today in the ordinance that provides guidance on clearing around chimneys, providing, 100 foot of defensible space, all the other little things that exist in the ordinance today. And this simply say, going forward, that if you're a property owner here in the county, you must meet the county's ordinance, and the county is relying on its current amended version of Public Resource Code 4291. So that way, when the inverse resistance zone provisions come into state law here within a year, we can actually just start to reference those as the standards here locally. I know there's probably a lot of interest about the good neighbor rule that exists today. That requirement is proposed to remain. We've actually made some modifications to the language to clarify. We've taken out the word good neighbor because that was a little bit challenging to understand. So we provided very specific provisions as to neighbors assisting neighbors through providing that 100 foot of defensible space when it extends across a property line. We've also enhanced the defensible space provisions. There was some confusion that existed as to whether distances greater than 100 feet could be required for defensible space. So we've clarified in the ordinance that under certain topographical situations, such as you may not be able to see the slide, this is a house that exists up in Kelsey. It's right off the Highway 193 and it's sitting on a very steep slope. This is the type of example where the topography and the fuels there probably warrant greater than 100 foot of defensible space. And so we've clarified that defensible space can be extended beyond 100 feet if it warrants, up to 300 feet total. Next slide. Critical facilities, and this is an example one. This is a large propane tank that exists in Georgetown. Concern about that is from a firefighter's safety perspective. If you have a large propane tank that's at risk during a fire, what amount of resources and efforts to keep that tank from becoming involved in fire are pretty important to us. So we are proposing some specific guidance depending on the size of propane tanks and above ground fuel tanks to have defensible space, depending on, again, on the size of the tank. We also are proposing telecommunication sites, so radio repeater sites for public safety frequencies, telecommunication sites here in the county that have in fires elsewhere been lost fairly early, which has delayed or impacted evacuations. We're proposing some specific criteria for those facilities. Freestanding photovoltaic systems. So again, you see more and more today these photovoltaic solar farms that almost exist on properties. And if they're threatened by a fire, they can create a lot of challenges, again, from a firefighter safety perspective. Plus, I can tell you, if you ever lost one of those, they're pretty darn expensive to replace in a fire, after a fire, I should say. So we're providing some requirements there. And then another, this was a key finding from the Caldor fire, the importance of maintaining our public water supply system for fire suppression purposes is something that I think gets overlooked. So we're proposing some specific requirements in that area as well. Next slide. We do not see Ted Woods from the county, so I'll talk a little bit about the enforcement process changes. So again, the current ordinance has an enforcement mechanism. It's designed to coach and encourage property owners to comply with the ordinance. It does have administrative fines that can be assessed, but it's a very, I would describe it almost as a cumbersome process. And so we've been working a lot with county council as to how to streamline it. And we're actually looking at mirroring what the county's efforts are in its code enforcement program. The county feels strongly is probably a far more streamlined process to get a concern through the process as quickly as possible, get it adjudicated and get it abated. If it's necessary. But certainly that's not the first step that we're gonna take. We're gonna try to coach and educate property owners and work with them and try to get them to comply with the ordinance. But if there is property out there and you know of some that the homeowner, for whatever reason, is refusing to comply, and it's a serious fire risk, then the county's efforts towards code enforcement, model, I think would probably be the best methodology. So it does talk about hearings, appeals, so we do have an appeal process that's available for property owners that wish to challenge the concern. It also has abatement provisions, and it also has ultimately the ability to administer administrative fines to the property. So we're looking at that model to try to beef up, in some cases, our efforts, but also to streamline it so that we can adjudicate it fairly quickly. It's kind of the end of my presentation. I probably took way too long, but I would be happy to answer any questions in the room first, and then maybe we'll go to the chat after that.
Yeah, so we definitely have some time for questions. And so what I will try to do here is balance between taking the questions for Ron in the room, and then I'll monitor online, and we'll try to make sure we capture them in here as well. So fire away, Ron.
Well, we'll go counterclockwise. I see two of them.
Ron, one of my airport hangar buddies who recently passed away, he had a great gift to him. If the county could do some vegetation mitigation up at the airport near the hangars, I would assume that's critical infrastructure. And the people who have the hangars in the city of Placerville Airport would really appreciate it. I think that's county property.
First off, I'm sure you guys are familiar. The county does have a reporting methodology. It does have a process that can be used today, where if a property owner or a neighbor is concerned about a fire risk, they can file a complaint with the county, and then those complaints are then forwarded to an investigating official to look at. So I would encourage you to do that. And certainly county-owned facilities are not exempt from the ordinance, from complying with the ordinance. And commercial industrial uses are uses that are subject to the ordinance. Chris.
So I was at the Board of Supervisors when they were doing their departmental reporting, part of the budget process, a couple of days. I had brought up to Sue, in terms of going to the podium, the question of what's going on, because there's so many parts now, where before you could kind of guess because it was simple, but the complexity of now what you've said, what Ken's discussed in terms of the Office of Wildfire Resiliency and Preparation, that office being in the CAO's office, the Department of Transportation, and they're trying to get grants, and I think they've been successful. Roadside clearance. I mean, can you simply, in a minute or so, kind of take us through, and if there's no answer yet, that's a good answer. Take us kind of through summarizing then what you just said.
I can take a chance. I don't know, maybe Sue and or Ken might.
Sue may be able to help.
So the and as relates to the issue that airport too, there was a grand jury report that came out. One of the recommendations was for the county to come up with a plan for how we're going to comply with our own ordinance on county properties. And so it's actually the Department of Transportation that has been tasked with coming up with that plan. And so I know that Rafael is working on that right now, and coming up with some funding to put toward that. So that's that piece of the county actually mitigating vegetation on its own properties. But as we've discussed, for homeowners themselves, and one of the reasons we changed the ordinance name is we didn't want to give the impression that we're in the business of going out and mitigating vegetation everywhere on every property. So we're going to rely on getting a good plan to implement this ordinance, to get people educated, get inspections done, get the outreach done, so that people come into voluntary compliance. That's gonna be the focus.
Now, just to follow up then. What you said is, I believe, what you told me before, so it's consistent. But do you guys see how complex that is in trying to get the word out to the general public in the form of communications? That, just if you could acknowledge that, you understand.
So org chart. We've presented that to you various times. We've actually moved our public outreach component up kind of next to the advisory committee. So if you're familiar with sort of an incident command system structure, the public advisory committee is now part of the command staff. And so we recognize the importance of that and getting the word out, and that's going to need to be a heavily coordinated effort with all of our stakeholders. So absolutely committed to that moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, the only other thing I might add is, I think one recognition that the advisory committee has made, and they made it fairly early on, was that the focus really needed to change somewhat in the county on its efforts related to communities. That really we needed to start to double down on the fire adaptive community concept here locally, and start to work with the fire safety councils and individual communities and neighborhoods to try to get more efforts growing at the local level. That the county doesn't and never will have the resources, the state doesn't have the resources, the local fire districts don't have it. And so it's really going to take a consolidated effort. And so the advisory committee, I think, is trying to more and more share that with everybody that's listening, that, hey, look, we've got to start at the local level. If we don't do that, then we're going to continue to repeat the experience that we saw both in Caldor fire, the Angora fire up in the basin, what we saw really avoided in the Georgetown area with the mosquito fire. It's a guarantee that we will have large fires in this county in the future. So we've got to really put our focus and efforts on trying to minimize the threat to the individual properties and the people that live there. And that's a whole concept that's, I don't think a lot of people are truly trying to have truly begun to appreciate it.
Thank you.
Allison.
I have a question about wells. You had private water as being one of the critical infrastructure, and most well houses are less than 120 square feet.
Yeah.
So is this going to be then 100 feet around everybody's well house?
Now that, again, if they're less than 120 square feet, it's not required. The focus on water systems was, again, both public and private, because there's a recognition that's both exist. And really what we're focusing on are the water storage tanks, the pump houses that supply those tanks and supply the fire hydrant systems where they exist, and any of that type of infrastructure. So it's not the individual homeowners well that we're worried about, it's the water distribution systems that supply fire hydrants in the community. But there's a recognition that there are both public and private. Heather?
Well, first of all, thank you for taking on this being and all that have been a part of it. So my question is more on, again, for that homeowner who is selling their home, and who do they go to either get something to show the realtor that they're either in compliance or what they need to do to be in compliance? Where do they go?
So I should have, thank you for that point, because you asked me that earlier, and I should have brought it up during my presentation. So the ordinance is proposed to have provisions added regarding real estate transactions. So under state law today, under Civil Code section 1102.19, whenever there's a sale of a home in either high or very high fire hazard severity zones, a defensible space inspection must be performed. Those inspections today are being performed by CAL FIRE here in the county. The CAL FIRE has a process set up where you can request those inspections. The CAL FIRE will do the inspection at no charge, and then the homeowner is supposed to disclose that to the buyer prior to the sale being completed.
So those in the fire safety council that's gone through the CAL FIRE program and currently using the El Dorado County form that mimics their form, that would be enough to,
State law does currently allow those to be used as part of the sale process, so a fire safe council assessment form. That was issued or provided to a homeowner could be utilized today. In that process for a sale of a home. The county's ordinance draft is proposed to change that. To require it to be performed by a local fire district or CAL FIRE.
okay,
So that kind of avoids that issue, and it also changes the timeline, because again, a seller or buyer, once that report is issued, has up to 1 year in state law if they're only meeting the requirements of 4291. But the county's ordinance is more restrictive, and we're actually proposing a more restricted timeline as well. We're proposing that those changes have to be completed within 90 days of the sale. That's really. Yes, sir.
Okay, a couple of quick ones, probably not quick, but how is mobile home parks being addressed by this complexity of closeness and amount of vegetation around the mobile homes? Maybe there's better terminology, but you can figure out what I'm asking
Oh, yeah.
with that one.
Well, first off, mobile homes are not exempt from complying with the ordinance, so the defensible space requirements around each individual property or each individual trailer would have to. They'd have to meet the 100 feet of defensible space, they'd have to meet the good neighbor provisions and all of that, so. And remember, the ordinance doesn't just address vegetation, it also talks about combustible materials around properties, so things like cardboard and boxes and those types of materials are also required to be kept clean.
Okay, and you can imagine the complexity of that and the non-inspection of the mobile home areas, but that's okay. Another question is, which I've ran across a number of times, is vacant properties or undeveloped properties, and not working with the homeowner who has a house closer than 100 feet from the property line and refusing to help at all, even with certified letters and all of the other actions the homeowner has taken with zero help with that quote unquote good neighbor, have not worked at all on that aspect.
Yeah, the good neighbor policy applies both to developed and undeveloped properties. So if you're a homeowner and you're concerned about the property next door and it's a vacant or undeveloped property, it's still subject to the county's ordinance when it's within, when the hazard is within 100 feet of their structures. It does apply.
It does, but is there any, besides going through this other process, you said notifying the county?
Yeah.
Trying to get that homeowner, I mean, that property owner to do something on that vacant property.
I can tell you because I've been involved in the program the last couple of years. The county receives about 150 to 200 complaints annually from property owners. Almost all of them are that exact concern. And the challenge is working with absentee landowners or people who may or may not have a whole lot of control over it, but we do that every day. So.
Well, also that leads up into the Grizzly Flat area where a number of the property owners were didn't even know CAL FIRE burnt their property. So there are problems from that perspective as well. One last question. Do you foresee any changes in designation between oak woodlands and conifer forest areas for fuel reduction with the spacing of trees?
The spacing of trees, no, I think we're gonna follow what the law already says about spacing of trees within 100 feet, which.
No, I meant between the trees, because you can imagine there's a significant difference between
Oh, yeah,
pine forest and oak, where they limbs cross each other, but not adding the changing of the fuel dynamics.
yeah, I think our focus is really going to be more on the understory fuels underneath those trees, as well as removing the dead and hazardous, trees and vegetation in that same 100-foot buffer.
So let's go ahead and Ron and switch to some folks online that have been waiting, and we'll come back to the room. So one of the questions is, what does school district exception mean? Are they included or exempt?
So. Public school districts are viewed as quasi-state owned properties. So they are exempt from the county's ordinance, so we're gonna try to work with them at the local level through, other means, but we can't enforce the ordinance on public schools. Private schools are subject to the provisions in the county's ordinance. They are not exempt.
Another question is relative to power generation. Power generation and transmission infrastructure lines is not critical infrastructure question mark. So I think that's the question. And
Sure. Associated facilities for those sites, because those are subject to the California Public Utility Commission guidelines for clearance requirements. So we chose not to include them in the category of critical infrastructure at this point.
And another question, which I believe you've answered, but if we haven't, I'll restate it and make sure. But the question is, have there been any changes to vacant lots within the ordinance?
Now, countywide requirements that all vacant lots be maintained with certain clearance requirements and pick a number. Instead, it continues to reinforce the concept that we're using today in the ordinance with the good neighborhoods. So where that adjacent vacant land is situated near a home, they would have to assist in meeting the 100-foot defensible space requirement for that structure.
And then lastly, from the chat for now, suggestion, which I know this has been done in the past, but suggest that revised defensible space ordinance changes be published in the next property tax mailings.
And I believe that's likely to.
Good.
Tamara, I think.
Yeah.
Was anything about roads?
Sure.
Is anything about roads considered in this ordinance?
The ordinance actually today talks about roadways that are used or may be used as part of an evacuation process. It did not really provide a whole lot of guidance in there. It did say subject to the county's determination if clearances could be required along roads where they may be used as part of an evacuation route. We're proposing some amendments to that section that would strengthen the requirements and provide some very specific criteria. We're proposing that when those roads are determined, that there be a minimum 10-foot clearance on either side shoulder, and that could be extended beyond that where it was deemed necessary. So there is proposed amendments to that section that would provide clarity on that subject. I think you had a part 2 to that question.
Well, I guess the next thing is how and when would those evacuation routes be determined that then would require the 10-foot? Yeah.
That's exactly the next step. And again, it would apply to both public and private. So there's just as many private road systems out there that serve a community or one way. Those are probably easier.
Just a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
The county's risk averse.
Camera.
I don't think she wanted to emphasize that. Because I've been around the county government for 40 years, I understand what that means. It means don't put yourself in a risky situation where there may be a financial liability. They've been reluctant to want to identify emergency evacuation routes for that reason. Right. Because once you say a route is a route, then it gains that notoriety that it's going to be always that a route, and they've been reluctant to want to do that. Do you see that changing? And can you kind of clarify then what you just told Tamara?
Well, I think what I would say on that is, first off, we recognize that the term evacuation route is a complex term in itself, that it involves a lot of components to it. We are not proposing in the ordinance to insert the word evacuation route. Instead, we're talking about ingress and egress roads. So if it's a road that's normally used as part of the convenience of traffic of moving in and out of a neighborhood, that would be the focus.
Yeah.
I think Lester's had his hand up in the back for a bit.
early on, or towards the end, you talked about enforcement and we referenced fines. In the current ordinance, one of the big emphasis had been actually doing the work and then holding the property owner responsible. Has that changed, or is that, was the shift of the fines?
Well, the shift is in the methodology used. So again, fines. And the ordinance talks about it being an infraction, which makes it a criminal type of penalty, which then does lead to an appeal process that could ultimately land itself into the courts. So instead, we're pursuing an administrative provision and administrative fines that could be done internally in the county through a hearing officer, so that that whole process could stay in house and be more effective.
Because in the past, when we've been talking to property owners about the ordinance, we talked about that if you don't do it, the county can come in and do the work. And then, and so that quite tell, is that still in there?
That's still in there, and that's the abatement process, which county council has gone through and has strengthened that as well. Make it good.
And then the one other question was just, do you know about when the actual ordinance revisions would be available for the public to look at?
So we're anticipating bringing this to the board of supervisors in either March or early April. So for first reading, so that the final document will be made available as part of that process.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm looking online. I don't see anything additional. I want to thank Ron and Hugh and just this group, Lucas in the back and a number of other folks, Jeff coming on board from CAL FIRE just recently, Megan, who's been part of it. This has been a lot. There's been a lot of work going into this, and obviously we could go on for a year trying to fine tune and fix, but they've learned a lot from the first few years of this new ordinance. And so this really reflects trying to make changes and adjustments based on what folks have learned. And I really want to emphasize what I heard both Ron and Hugh, and I'm sure Hugh can talk about it some more, but it's not just about the enforcement piece in the county and fire districts and CAL FIRE doing inspections with the ultimate goal of holding folks for abatement. It's about that voluntary compliance to get, because I think our end goal for everybody is to get us all, every one of our homeowners there. And so there's really an emphasis now in the working group, once they really get done with the meat of the ordinance changes, is to really work on the broader program. And that's working with all of us as to how we partner in getting these evaluations done. And they talked about this training coming up. This is groundbreaking for us because we're sort of the cutting edge of providing this training, where they've taken the state certified 3-day inspector course that the fire districts and fire agencies across California will be receiving, taking that and delivering it here and making it available initially through a train the trainer, and then ultimately this spring to folks that again want to participate. And it's a huge deal, but it's also raising the bar for sort of what they're asking us to do. And that is how do we provide things that Heather and many folks, Alice, have been doing for a long time. It's we're really now raising the bar to really engage in that home hardening and defensible space discussion, and really providing evaluations using the same sets of criteria and helping take credit for moving towards a goal of reaching more landowners. And again, at the end of the day, we want to get folks to be compliant. We want them to be safe. We want them to be able to meet the criteria, not ultimately have this goal of citing people or wherever we get. So there's a lot of work, but I think the take-home message is that the fire safe councils and the communities are a huge component to get to this goal of reaching all of our property owners throughout the county, particularly in the very high fire hazard severity zone. So I don't know if Ron or Hugh, you want to, before as we close out, you want to say anything more about the training and sort of what the thoughts are there.
That we're moving in a direction where the fire safe councils doing defensible space isn't going to be accepted in this. How do you say it? That we're not going to be a part of the process that identifies when you're outside of compliance.
Oh, I disagree.
Yeah.
I think,
No, that's what I thought I heard you say. So that's why I'm asking for clarification.
yeah, no, thanks. Thanks. And I would like to clarify, we're actually saying just the opposite.
Okay,
I mean, I look at the fire history map. I think Chris provided that on the back wall there of the El Dorado County fire history. And certainly, if you look at the last 20 years in the county, we've had 4 major fires that threaten our communities. And I mentioned earlier as well, we have about 85,000 properties that exist today with structures on them that property owners need assistance on or looking for help on. And we can't do it with Cal Fire can't do it, the fire districts can't do it alone. The terminology, and I think my response previously was related to real estate transactions, just kind of like a niche
yeah,
market there if you want. For us to change the attitude and the mindsets in our communities is actually starts with you guys. You guys play a critical piece to this. So, and to that end, the trainings that we're preparing, people and I have been working on a course curriculum this year that would be a 2-day course that we're proposing for fire safe council members who do home assessments. The course material is based off of what the state training curriculum is for firefighters and then fire inspectors and others who do this work in their local community. So we're using the exact same curriculum. We're trying to actually get the students out into some field work so they could actually practice what we talk about in class. And I think we're looking at 2 dates in April. We wanted to run it by you to get your feedback, because actually one of our thoughts, and maybe it's the wrong thought process, is maybe the students would be interested this first time around in a course that maybe started on a Friday and went into Saturday. But you know, maybe some folks would prefer a Tuesday, Wednesday, middle of the week type of course. We're not sure. So we're working on some of those concepts now. So I'd be curious to hear from all of you if we would offer a 2-day course. Is a midweek course timeframe the best option, or is it more focused around the weekend type of thing, a Friday, Saturday?
And keep in mind, Hugh says he'll buy lunch. Yeah, sure. We may actually be able to provide.
I should say this is just the first one, so we're actually for 3
Yeah.
training sessions this year. So we could actually do one on Friday, Saturday, we could do another one midweek later on, and then do something else. So I mean, we can try to meet everybody's needs. So this one training session that we're talking about is just the first group.
Would you have it in this room?
Yes.
Yes.
And so you're gonna get as many people as can physically fit.
No.
No,
Actually, just the opposite. We're looking at keeping it very narrow so we could spend quality time with each student. So we're looking at maybe a max students count of say 20 or 24 students.
Okay, thank you.
Tuesday, Wednesday.
There you go. So we've got Friday, Saturday, weekends coming online. So sounds like maybe a cross section if we do several courses, maybe blend it.
21st and 22nd of April.
That's a Friday, Saturday. So we're looking at the first course delivery being a Friday, Saturday, and then the next one, which we talked about doing a month later, in May, we'll focus on midweek. And then maybe we'll pick up a third one later on or before July 1st, that, catch everybody else.
And let me say the reason, just in case somebody's questioning, the reason we're trying to keep it we would like say 20 or so, because we plan to have multiple instructors for the course. It's not going to be one person standing up there for 2 days talking to you. You're going to have multiple people that are going to be doing presentations for parts of it. But once we break out and start doing the physical on the ground, evaluations of various homes in the area, we want to keep the group small. We could put one instructor with say 5 people. If we have 20, if we have 4 instructors, we could put 5 people. That makes it a whole lot better for people to question as you do that evaluation. Why are you looking at this, or what are you looking at that? So that's why we're doing that. But as Ron said, we once we have our own instructors after this class at the end of March, we're going to have our own instructors. We're now free to do that how often we want, however often we would like to. So that's where we're headed with it.
Let's go with the one more question from Ernie, and then we probably do need to go on.
Will the county ordinance, or what we want to call it, will that be a major component of this
Yep.
training?
Yep.
Very good. Would it be accepted by the board of supervisors by that time?
It should be. Because if we take the ordinance changes to the board in March, they will have completed, it's gonna be close, because the board requires 2 readings of the ordinance before it gets adopted, so, that would, the second one is likely to be right about the same time.
But it still doesn't prohibit us from talking about what the changes are gonna be and things as similar we talked about today, so.
And we certainly can talk today about the existing ordinance, that's the other. The ordinance, even as it exists today, is the law of the land.
Well, good. Wow. Thank you, Ron, for the presentation, and you and the gangs for being here. Oh. Well, thank you. I was going to ask that, Ron. Yes, hit Ron up afterward with all those things you're dying to ask. Item 6B is a ratification, a board action item, and thank you, Angel, for reminding me to get some information out so folks knew what we were looking at. But obviously, with the incredible amount of work that Heather and Pat and others have done to put together the hazardous tree program, obviously the challenge is always in the details of putting all of the pieces together, and they have done just that in terms of selecting project management and moving that forward. So today we have we need to have a discussion and get approval for Pat to move forward with putting a contract together with the selected project manager. But I think I want to turn it over to Pat to talk about how and or Heather to intervene, how the process works, so y'all know what we're talking about.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and to say that we've reached this point in the hazardous tree removal assistance program. Unlike Ron, I'll be brief, I promise. Sent sheet, it was a separate transmission to y'all in addition to the original board packet. So you might not have had a chance to read it, but I want to make sure you understand what we're going to vote on here this morning. Little background, in December of 21 and then finally culminating in March or February of 22, Heather penned a proposal for the entire county to help homeowners with remove hazardous trees on their property. We said, yeah, okay, we'll give it a try. And back in the wild west days of grants. And lo and behold, the grant was actually awarded and signed in August of 22. He said, oh, it's like, I think Deborah Cruz describes, we put in for a grant and then we got it awarded, we did the happy dance, and then we said, oh crap, now we got to do this. And so now we're doing this. We put out actually a call for a free release party of interested contractors to come and talk to us with a strongman RFP saying, what do you think? Is this something that you might want to bid on? What kind of changes should we make to the request for proposal? We had 2 contractors show up, MGE, which is the project management arm of Mountain Enterprises, and Mason Girard, which is another project management company based in Auburn. So then we had actually a follow-up meeting with MGE trying to clarify some points and things. And then we released the RFP on January 1st of this year and put ads in the local paper. We put it on our webpage, trying to get as many interested contractors as we could. On the due date, which was January 26th, we'd received 2 proposals, one from Mason Girard, who attended our pre-meeting, and one from an outside company called Wildfire Services, which is based in Windsor. And then I personally reached out to MGE, Ryan, and said, did we miss your proposal? You know, is there something that, did you email it to us and we didn't see it or what? They said, no, they chose not to bid, which is, you know, that's fine. So on January 31st, we had a source selection team, which was Heather, Jessica, and myself. Went through the 2 proposals that we received, we ranked them and scored them. And clearly, Mason Gerard was fully understood the project, they bid appropriately, and I'll talk quickly about that. And so we unanimously suggested that we proceed with the contract and award. So we had a couple of things about the proposal. One was wildfire was very sketchy. They bid on days. They bid the whole thing, including the tree removal part, and the RFP was only for the project management, so they weren't great. They bid the whole contract, like I said, $1,007,463. Mason, Bruce, and Gerard took a little different approach. They bid on a per property because they anticipated in their proposal they'd have to make at least, with a forester and or arborist, have to make at least 3 visits to each property. One to do the initial value evaluation, how many trees are they really hazardous, etc. One to go out there with a prospective tree removal company, and then one as a follow-up to verify the work was done properly. And they were going to also group these properties geographically so that then they could go to bid with tree removal companies and say, hey, we got 10 sites in Lotus, and have them go out and bid on that 10 sites. So the bottom line is that is the responsibility is kind of removed from the Fire Safe Council. While we'll participate and oversee, we don't have to do the actual nuts and bolts of contracting with tree companies. They bid $500 per parcel, $250 for the first visits, and then $250 payable after the work was done. We thought that was very reasonable and a really good approach that ties the payment to the actual work. And so they'd anticipated 350 properties. Who knows, you know, we allocated $4,000 per property on about $1 million removal budget. Could be 200, could be 300, so it's a variable price. We thought it was reasonable. They were very, very responsive to all the elements in our RFP, and we were real happy with the selection. So I come before you asking you to ratify that decision to choose that company and allow us to proceed with award of a contract to Madison, Bruce, and Gerard in the not to exceed amount of $175,000, which was their bid. We had allotted in our budget $98,000 for the project management, which was probably a little low, obviously from the bid. We do have flexibility. We can start, and as we see that we're getting close to the budget number, we can go back and ask for a modification. It's only moving within the contract element, some money back and forth. So I think in the past we've been successful in doing that, and I anticipate we'll be able to move whatever we need to as we proceed with the project. So that's what I'm wanting to write that. Motion.
Well, let's make a motion and we'll go to questions after, right after we make a motion, or maybe you made the motion. So Pat's made the motion, so we'll go to questions.
Okay. Can I make one
Oh,
second?
I think Chris had the first question.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Okay. Chris, and then we'll go to,
Pat did an excellent job, I think, summarizing it, but there was some fundamental questions that I thought were important here. what constitutes a hazardous tree? Since you know, I was involved with a project in Patterson. Individual trees were handled separately from roadside clearance and shaded fuel break. And because I'm saying that is because they are very, very unusual. And I've been at Heather's place, so I got to see what unusual means. They can constitute just monster trees that are essentially healthy, but really unsafe for a wildfire protection perspective. They can be dry, a lot of fuel in themselves. That they could be unhealthy. So can kind of give me an idea of what a hazardous tree is in the group, in your committee's perspective, because then I know why this company has done a good job, because you made it clear.
Yeah, a hazardous tree, I think our intent was one that threatens a habitable structure or ingress and egress. And it's up to our forester and our arborist to say, yes, that's a hazardous tree, or no, it's a healthy tree, it just happens to be probably closer to your house than we love.
May I make one clarification? to how you
Please
started
do.
on this? I don't.
Heather, could you grab the mic just so they can all hear you? Thank you.
I just don't want everyone to think that this was started as an all Heather show when Cameron did a lot of work involved, and so did Lester. And from way back when we first started talking about this concept to actually write the application, there were others heavily involved in talking this thing. Cameron, thank you. Eileen, Lester, I thank you. Eileen, I don't remember who else was doing that.
Thank you, thanks for the clarification. Any other questions or comments? I'm really, we the grant was awarded in August. Here we are in February. I wish we would have been able to move quicker, but that's the nature of the beast. And I'll be happy to say that we're working now on applications. Jessica's, it'll be similar to the chipping program where individuals turn in their applications. We group them and then review them. And so hopefully by the end of March, we'll be able to open that up and start accepting applications. Again, we anticipate doing between 200 and 300 individual properties. I think we'll be able to do that well within a lot of time frame. So it's exciting to get this started. Another way that the Fire Safe Council can help individual homeowners in the community. Yes. You can just yell.
But they can't hear on the other. Yes, thank you. And we will talk about that. And when I give my report, Elizabeth, but yeah, thank you for asking. Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second to authorize Pat to engage in putting together, reach out to MB&G for a contract for the hazard tree removal program. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Looking online, any opposition? Okay, hearing none, we're seeing all thumbs up online. Pat is approved to move forward with a contract. Thank you. Yeah, and again, thank you.
Proposals here in the folder with the RFP, with the grant award, just for full transparency. We didn't send them out to everybody because contractors are kind of sensitive to their, I'll say, proprietary data. So if you want to look at the two bids, they're here for you. We'll leave them on this table. You can come up at an appropriate time and have a look.
Thank you, Pat. So that moves us up to number 7, information items, and actually the chairman and report and communication. I just have 2 things. And first of all, it is about the website. So thanks for teeing that up, Elizabeth. And yes, we all recognize we literally have outgrown our website. With the activity level, again, we're supporting the greater breadth of all of the councils and the programs, and literally the partnerships, the links to all of the other activities going on around the county and the state, quite frankly, and the amount of information we're storing and providing access to. All of it has essentially put us in a place where we've exceeded the capacity and the infrastructure of the website we have. And so the e-board met week before last. With this as one of the key agenda topics is we need to move forward with a different plan. And the way this was structured originally was the website is managed in 2 places. It's hosted, so sort of that backroom infrastructure is hosted by DreamHost. So that's the platform where the website sits. And then Lanatech is the web design firm. So they do the day-to-day business of managing what the website looks like, how things work on that front page, and what things link to. So it takes those 2 together to have a functioning web page. We have evolved to where we're going to merge all of this into one company. We sat down with Lanatech. They have the capacity to do all of that and all in one place. And they're able to, again, we are spending a lot of extra money going to Lanatech every time we have a technical issue. We have to pay them each time to sort of resolve the technical issue, including sometimes trying to reach into DreamHost, who are very challenging to get information out of. It's all sort of online sort of interaction. So bottom line is we're going to move forward with the web page all migrating to Lanatech. They are coming back to us now with a plan for what that will look like, which includes reducing our footprint. So pulling things off of the web page, finding a different place to archive information, different processes for doing that don't use up as much space, while at the same time ensuring we have all of that functionality. Number 2, we not only have the defensible space in the chipping program, but as Elizabeth asked, we're going to be adding the hazardous tree removal program to the front burner as another program that will require online access, application, and sort of backroom support. So Lanatech will be building for us what that looks like, what we need to support that, including, do we need to take a harder look at our online application? We're getting a lot of challenges and concerns from folks, really folks that aren't savvy, kind of like me, with computer. And so they're struggling with how to form fill some of the information. We're also seeing that some of the web browsers and other softwares that folks are using isn't necessarily compatible, or it's a bit challenging with the software that the website is using. So those are all things we're asking Lanatech to help us resolve, to try to make the front end user interface more user-friendly. And at the same time, we know we're going to be doing a complete wholesale redesign of the web page. And we already know some of the basic things that need to be done, but we also want to be reaching out to the greater Fire Safe Council community to see what other things you want on the web page, and some assistance with sort of helping with that layout. In particular, we've been speaking with Alice about outreach and how we can do a better job of linking folks to the web page and providing better interaction. And again, our web page, we've outgrown it. So more to come, but the first step is having Lanatech come back to us and tell us what we need to do to get migrated, and that will be the first step. So we have some questions, so let's go with Tamara, and then I'll go with you, David. Oh, you got either one.
I'm sure you're doing absolutely the right thing. I just want to give a shout out that flip phone technophobic David Zelinsky managed to fill out 3 veteran grant applications in each program, 5 minutes each. And that's even accessing the assessor's website to copy and paste the. So it sounds like it's working well. If I can do it in 5 minutes times.
Well, I know that. That is saying something. And I always say that because I'm right there with you having chat.
David, are you sure you had the right website?
All right. Yeah, Tamara.
Request that accessibility be included in the design of the website. And real accessibility, not just to come off the widget. There are different levels, and I think it's important to have like elderly people, people with disabilities who might need to access our website.
Also, thank you.
Is this gonna be smartphone compatible? So that, you know, you need that ability to drive it off your smartphone. And that requires adjusting the way it looks in order to make it compatible. It may be additional money. I don't know if that was included in your thoughts, but I just wanted to make sure.
It's a good thought, and we'll bring that back to them to see what it would take to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Angel. Yeah, and I think that was the biggest concern we had was just in the migration, what that means. The website could actually be down for a little bit. They usually build a copy of it, right? But yes, so what we will do is make sure when the plug gets pulled that we have everybody is noticed, and yes, and we're going to be staying in connection with all of you to see if there are issues as this happens so we can fix those. Nope, appreciate that. Secondarily to that, we've been trying to bring presentations to the meetings periodically. I know we've been having a few, and it's trying to find those things that are timely, like today's presentation. And so certainly open to other thoughts as to what you all want to have presented and talked about. What we do have on the radar for March, and it'll be a shorter presentation, but the Commission on Aging has reached out, and they really want to be partnering with the fire safe councils collectively to help with the messaging. I mean, obviously, so many of our programs are right in their wheelhouse, and so they want to make sure we have a real good understanding of their program and some of what the senior community's needs are. And so I thought that was a good opportunity to have them come next month and talk about their program and maybe foster some ideas as to how we can help each other, particularly where we support our senior community with defensible space and the chipping program, and just in general addressing fire related issues for that part of the community. So they'll be coming up next month, and then again, not necessarily looking for presentations every month, but if there are other things, talk to Alice, talk to us to see if we want to build some things in. We are working with Lester, because there's the El Dorado National Forest has a LIDAR program, and they would like to present the value of that program in making vegetation and other assessments. We're trying to balance between what would be good sort of for the greater audience and for everyone versus how do we maybe put on some separate sort of workshops and things. And so we may be moving that one more into a separate workshop, but we definitely want to try to provide programs and make things available to folks. So if you have thoughts, send them in, and we'll try to, keep those things scheduled. So in any event, that's what I had. I will then now defer to Hugh for the vice chair's report.
Okay, things continue on. I continue to sit as part of the OWOPR task group, as well as the Defensible Space group. Also the new outreach, as far as the outreach is concerned, I've talked to Alice, and Alice has agreed to sit with that group. I will continue to sit there for a couple meetings, but turn that outreach over to Alice, who's taken that on, and I appreciate that. Also, part of the greater Placerville task group, and also I attend all the FPOs and deal with those folks. I want to talk just a little bit, just briefly, about the Defensible Space training. We have March 30th and 31st. We have the Defensible Space Train the Trainer course, which Ron talked about a bit, which is going to be in El Dorado Hills. I think we're going to sponsor probably four, maybe 5 spots from the Fire Safe Council. The rest of the class will be filled up with fire people and what have you. Now, understand, this is the trainer. The people that take this class and get done will be the people we expect to train you, all of us. So if you're not interested in that, great, because we'll take care of that in April. But if you are, I need to let us know and we will get you signed up for that. I know I've talked to Alice, she's interested, I'm gonna do it. And then if there's a couple more people that are interested, let me know and we'll get you in the price for that and we'll pick the price up, but it's about $200 a head to take that class. So that's coming up on March 30th and 31st. And then as Ron mentioned, we're gonna do the train-the-trainer, or not the trainer, the defensible space class for the Fire Safe Council people on the first one, April 21st and 22nd. We'll do it here in this room. It'll be all day 8 to 5, Friday and Saturday. And next month, I will try to have a sign-up sheet with some other dates for the other classes. And then we'll have columns and those of you that are interested in those particular dates can sign up. So we'll know when we'll be able to do that. So that will be there. Lunch will be served for those classes. We'll take care of lunch will be brought in here so people don't have to leave. So that's coming up. The other thing I want to talk about that's coming up is CAL FIRE has a webinar coming up, and I put a few flyers on the back table. They may be gone now, but this is on Monday, February the 27th. It's a webinar talking about information regarding home hardening and defensible space. Wow, what a coincidence. I will put, if you haven't, I will put the sheet on the back table. And if you're interested in that, because they don't have a lot of handouts, take your phone, just take a photo of it, because it has a URL, how to log in on that and the times and that sort of thing. So I'll put that on the back table. That's coming up for anyone that's interested in that. And one last thing, I want to remind everyone that this room, every time we have our monthly meeting like today, we have this room all day. So if anyone has, and I know Ken was talking about some of the little micro classes, stuff like that, we could do that after this meeting. But anyone that wants to hang around and like if you're a particular fire safe council, you want to have a little meeting with somebody, you're welcome to stay here. We'll get things, you know, everything put away except the table. You can sit around, have your own meeting, and when you leave, you just walk out the door a lot. So just bear in mind, if you do have something and you're looking for a place or you're thinking you'd like to meet with the group, we can use this room on when we have our meetings this month. Like I say, we have it all day. So that's all. That's really all I have for now.
Alice?
Just a quick question here. So when you talk about defensible space training, and maybe I'm going to do this before, would that include any home hardening or just?
No, it's home hardening defensible space. Thank you, Alice. That in fact, that's going to sort of be the title of our course. And this again, as Ron said, this is essentially the exact same course that the State Fire Marshal's Office for STAKE, their State Training Education Advisory Committee, approved last November for all of the sworn folks in California. It's actually, for them, it's an F-step course, Fire Service Training Education System. We will not be a certified F-step. First, you got to pay for that, and there's really no reason for us to do that. But we will be a certificated course, and Ron and I are working on how we're going to run that and how we're going to work that. But the course again will be, we hope to have for the class for you folks, we'll have multiple instructors. So you, like I say, you're not sitting there listening to one person drone on all day about different things. So we'll share the wealth.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I have. Any other questions?
Okay. Great. Thank you, Hugh. Next up, Secretary's report, Karen. Thank you.
First thing I want to mention, you know, I'm always kind of pushing people to use the correct forms for insurance submission. And right now we're having a problem with getting the forms. When you click on it, it's not available. So if anyone is needing, I apologize for that, and we're working on it. That's part of that whole computer system thing. So don't worry if you need a form, if you need a certificate of insurance. I'm just typing them all up and sending them to the insurance company. We've already talked about it and they're accepting those. So don't stress if if you need a certificate and you can't get the form, just let me know. Give me the information, type me the information, and then I'll get it to the insurance company. Next, before you know it, it's gonna be time for the councils to renew. That's coming up in June. And so I'll be hounding you to get forms to me. In the meantime, in the next, probably within the next week, I'm gonna be sending all of the councils the officer contact information again. And I need you to just look at it and update it so that I'm sure everybody is getting the notices that they need to renew their fire safe houses. And if you have any questions about that, just, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. One other thing, so most people know that Mosquito had a workbook done, and Texas Hill had it done too, and we've had a lot of requests as to who did it. So they wanted to use it, and that was Johnny Valenzuela, and his company is Ultiview, and he's done it for Kensington, another number of fire districts and fire safe councils. So anybody that wants to have a workbook done, just again, reach out to me and I can send you all of his business contact information. I think you were pretty happy with yours. We were thrilled with ours. And
Yeah. I actually, what happened, just so you know, I did contact him because I asked Karen who did theirs. I contacted him. I also contacted some other folks that I know, but I met with him. Came over into town. He and I sat down for a couple hours over a cup of coffee, talked about where we wanted to go with it, some ideas that we had that were a little bit different in some areas that Karen did, and asked if he could do that. And he said, his comment was, let me see if I can give you a draft. And he came up with a draft, and Janet can have more to say about that too. But we looked at that, worked with him. It was really a pleasure to work with him because everything we suggested, he actually did. He didn't have any issues, and he was quick and getting it done for us. And there was a couple options. He would either take care, give us a name who could print it, or like in our case, we elected to go on our own because we got a little better deal, we thought, from locally at Mountain Mail, and we had it printed there. So, and it all worked really well. And we have some copies. We'll lay one out. You can look at it if you're interested.
And he's redoing, we're getting ours updated also.
Oh, you liked ours so much?
I steal some things from yours. So.
Now we know how it goes.
Anything else on the secretary's report? Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. Any double check, any questions for Carol? Good. David, 1 second. And just know that this is just one option. The fire safe councils aren't advocating for any one vendor over another.
No.
I think you're just sharing what your experience was. So understand that there's you obviously need to do your own due diligence and research. So
No. Contact information. I'm happy to give it, but that's it.
great. Thank you. David.
Be sure about bringing them to the Thompson Fire Safe. Apparently you're coming to, and if you need, we have a little bit of money, so if you need help giving it to them.
Okay, yeah, no,
Good.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll bring some for.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You guys can talk.
Yeah.
We can coordinate offline there and take care of that. Sure.
Later, when we report out.
Yeah. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
So next up, I'd like Janet for the treasurer's report, and I'll put some things up online.
Morning, everybody. I have a number of things today for the treasurer's report. If everybody is interested, if you go to the next page, for the project report, there were a couple of changes that have been made on the project report. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention. The first one is in the past, there was a line item on there under federal grants for the Forest Service non-federal lands. And Pat and I finally got together and recognized that I had double counted the Stevens Authority secondary grants that they have provided us in that line. So on this report, I have removed it. from the report because the funds are reported at the top under the Stevens Authority for Sierra Springs, Grizzly Flats, and Gold Bridge. In next month's report, because those additional funds came under a separate grant number, next month's report will actually have them broken out by grant numbers. So you'll be able to see the original grant under the number that's shown here, and then next month we'll show the additional separated out. So watch for that. The new grant on here today is that we received, as Ken had mentioned previously, the El Dorado County has authorized the Fire Safe Council to receive additional Title III money. So on this report, you can see that there is a new Title III amount for $120,641. And we have received that check. So that adds to our Title III balance. The date on there is actually the ending date of the agreement that we have with the county. So we are talking with them about whether we need to extend it or whether we can run under the existing authorities. But those funds are now available to us to use for Title III purposes. If we can go back to the first page. On the budget for the Fire Safe Council, when we established the budget, we put in a pretty significant dollar value, knowing that we were hiring additional administrative services help with these two fine ladies here. And so we had put in a budget, assuming that all of their time was going to be spent on out of the Fire Safe Council fiscal sponsor fee amount. But what we're finding is the majority of Jessica's time is being charged off to grants. So I wanted to let everybody know that we have looked at that amount. And instead of anticipating a $62,000 expenditure there, we really think that we're going to have about a $30,000 expenditure there. So there's $30,000 in savings that we will be seeing off of that line item. Now, I know that we have overspent on our contract tech support and some of these other lines. And so we can talk at our next monthly e-board meeting about whether we want to move those funds around and report it out or just show them as current deficits. But it will cover any cost for the website that we may incur that is above what we have budgeted. So there is that $30,000 savings there. Okay, and I think that's all for that. We have been receiving Amazon Prime donations, and I want to thank everybody who has in their Amazon purchases donated the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council as a donee for your percentage of your purchase. And we appreciate that Amazon had put this program together to benefit nonprofits such as ours. They have stopped that program. You all should have been notified of that, and they are going to donate their funds centrally into a bigger collective on their own. So we will no longer be receiving the Amazon Smile donations. We received our last one, I believe, this month for a little over $60. We were getting about $60 every quarter, which not a lot, but it was always good to get. So just know that those donations we won't be receiving anymore. For our Associate Fire Safe Councils, I realize it's only February, but I want to put this on your radar for those councils who use our tax ID number. The end of the year is coming, and in April or late April, early May, I will start putting out information for the profit and loss statement that needs to be submitted by the right after the end of June. So the process won't change from last year. It will be a summary of your activity over the year with your July 1 bank statement and your June 30th of this year bank statement to support the change in dollars. But that will be coming. I just want to stick it on your radar because it will be here before you know it. We have been, I'd like to put out a reminder that by our policy, we, will process invoices received by the 5th of the month for checks during that month. For example, for any activity in January, as long as I received a request for reimbursement by the 5th of February, it would be processed in February and a check would be received around the 3rd week. We have been trying to be accommodating to some of our vendors and to some of our councils. And that has caused us a problem this month where our accountant was unable to accommodate us with checks by today. So I'm hoping to have checks for all of our invoices by the end of this week. But we will be going back to our policy of any request for reimbursement must be received by the 5th of the month to be processed in that month. So if that causes anybody concern, talk to me, let me know what your issue with that is, but I'm going to hold pretty firm to that from here on out. And with that, I open for questions.
Alice.
I had a question, I'm just, because some people have been asking me, and I didn't know the answer, for this is good Title III fund, they'll have to be spent by March 31st. So obviously, they can be submitted in April, but can they be for something that's used in April but is paid for in March?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. And there's been a few that have asked questions of that very same. And now our whole intent here is to try to, one, get the money spent, but we need to be reporting it, around May. So we want to get these things wrapped up. But yes, and if you've got some one-offs you have questions of, just send them in and we can answer them specifically. Be the best way to handle that. Any other questions before we'll take a motion? Put a motion. I'd like to hear a motion on the table to approve the treasurer's report. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear? Okay, Karen makes a motion. Do I have a second? Alice seconds. Any comments, questions on additionally on the treasurer's report?
Are we approving? I'm sorry, are we approving the one that was sent to us, or has there been an update?
No, what we shared today was what was sent to all the board members earlier this week. Yes. All right, motion and a second on the table to approve the treasurer's report as presented. All those in favor say aye. Any opposition? Okay, treasurer's report is approved as presented. Thank you, Janet. I know there's a lot happening in that world. Okay, and I want to thank the partners for sticking with us. There's a lot today, and I know we're running well into the meeting, but let's dive right in. I see Jason, BLM, I think.
Every day, it's good to see everybody. Sorry, it's been a few months since I've been back here, but going kind of double duty roles in our state office. It's good to see everyone. Keep breathe. We are burning out in the bar, but hopefully we get some weather in the next 5 or 6 days. Other than that, it's good to see everyone.
Thank you. Next up, CAL FIRE, Megan and team.
Good morning. I think last time I saw everybody, I had not really stepped into my official role here in the unit as the wildfire resiliency program chief. So we're officially in that role now. And what that program is going to include is oversee state regulations, our defensible space program. So all of our inspectors will be in our shop. Our pre-fire engineer will be working for me as well. And also resiliency programs, which includes the being the liaison for groups like the Fire Safe Council, Fire News, as well as the community for the County Co-operative program as well. So, like Ken had mentioned earlier, we are kicked off the Public Outreach Advisory Committee, which is going to be where we are developing a coordinated effort for public outreach amongst all the agencies. We're working on getting those key roles filled right now. And yeah, that's pretty much where the program's at. So I'm officially here. If anybody needs to hold me. My information, I can get it out to you guys.
And that's Jeff Hogue for, I probably forgot to introduce him correctly, but I see that Chris Payne has a question.
Like I said, I go to the Board of Supervisors a lot, so we talk about Cal Fire as if you're over there. And county government is here sometimes. I'm not saying this all the time, but sometimes. It would be nice periodically to hear how things are going, but this is our best shot at hearing things. So hazardous severity maps and the program.
Right.
Who's gonna report on that, how it's going, the timeline, where are we in the timeline? Since we only see it once a month, maybe somebody could take that on.
Right, so we already did our, what was it, the community reading, on the rollout for that for every county in the state. It was supposed to wrap up, I think, in the middle of this month, but they put a 60-day extension on it, so it should be the mid-April or so.
April 4th. April 4th.
Yeah, the public comment period will end April 4th. So once that's done, then they'll take all that information and the board will make an assessment on whatever they got. And if they need to make corrections on the map, then they will. But like I said, it's been extended for that 60-day period. So we shouldn't hear any major changes until after that.
Anything that's come up that surprised you, or is it pretty much as you identified what you thought was going to happen?
Well, so the public hearings went as expected. As you know, we weren't really answering questions, we were accepting public comment. And those go to the Office of State Fire Marshal. They didn't go to us. So we was not, unless someone has copied me on the email, I have so as we receive updates from the Office of State Fire Marshal, we will definitely share them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good. Thank you, Cal Fire. Next up, I think I'm gonna look to Ron for filling both roles, fire chief and FPO, or unless I'm missing somebody. No, that's different Tim.
Well, in the interest of time, I'll be brief according to Pat, I talked about chief. Which we meet tomorrow is going to be on looking at the county's ordinance and the inspection practices and how we can all work together to improve that. So that's our major effort. That's pretty much all I have to report tonight. Good job.
Thank you, Ron. We will try not to waste the time extension you just gave us. So I don't see anybody from the Forest Service. I don't think Jacoby made it today, and I don't see anybody online. So we'll follow up there.
And you want to Jacoby and his staff, the maps that we're trying to coordinate?
Yeah, do you want to cover that really briefly? I mean, really briefly.
We did have a very productive meeting with the Forest Service and the various components in the Forest Service about updating the maps of their projects. We're going to provide them maps of our projects and proposed projects. And we're going to meet again in about another month to reconcile those so we can try to integrate our efforts, especially when it comes to grants and the Stevens Authority and communities trying to get Strawberry included in that. So it's an effort that's ongoing. End of report.
Thank you. And thank you for covering that, Pat. So I don't see Mark from the RCD. I don't know, Maya. Why don't I just defer to you to cover both the RCD and the Fire Safe Coordinator update at the same time?
Quick report from the RCD, they are actively engaged with the work to the Highway 50 private landowners and cabin owners, and then also private cabin owners in Olo Ranch and Happy Valley area. With other projects, we're moving forward with the South Carolina Collaborative Project, Paloma Lotus, and Birdstown Project. And Mark will be presenting tonight at a community meeting in Oklahoma. Anybody looking for plan? And that is a report from the RCD. The fire safety coordinator report is I had the opportunity to attend several community meetings, which is really great. Community-wide, Our Lake Trail had a great meeting. It was pretty well attended. And highlights from that are they are partnering with the Bureau of Reclamation and I think North. To aid their work in Auburn Lake Trail that is right beside the Auburn State Recreation Area, and they encourage and kind of catalyze the work that the Bureau of Reclamation is doing in the area. So that's pretty cool to see. Greenstone also had a community information meeting. John was there. Jay, whose last name I forgot, and all kinds of fire safety council, Chop, thank you. They Chop gave a great presentation on reports of the flexible space and home hardening. And I presented a little bit of information about highlighting. Big questions that are coming out of that group are insurance related. Hard for the presenters to answer those questions because I don't think a lot of us are well versed in insurance, and it's pretty subjective in my understanding. With respect to insurance agencies, necessarily the California Insurance Commission doesn't control what they do. In any case, then Mark Egbert presented at the Georgetown Fire Safety Council meeting. A really good meeting. Just we've got our BLM partner here. The work that's going on in Georgetown Divide is on BLM land funded by BLM, and that's just a really cool partnership. Mark commented that it's rarely seen, so it's really neat that it's happening right now. Thank you for partnership in that. And yesterday I had the honor of, or Monday, I had the honor of attending the dedication of a bench plaque at Community Library kiosk at Station 84 in El Dorado Hills to Peggy Willis, who was a founding member of the Lake Hills Fire Safety Council. The event was well attended. It was clear that Peggy devoted a lot of time and energy to her community. She was well loved, respected, missed, and is now well commemorated. It was a really great event. I was happy to be there. In the background of all this, I engaged in Firewhite community establishment discussion with a group of people, including Alice and Ron and Ken, of course. And we're working to organize a process that is supportive of community establishment and of the fire protection officers who serve these communities. For El Dorado County, it's still kind of a brainstorm at this point, so business as normal with respect to that. And with the California Fire Safety Council, I attended a workshop that focused on challenges to involve in groups like ours. Some groups cited socioeconomic disparities, limiting the availability for volunteers, encouraging volunteerism in general, and difficulty engaging through different media types. So if you feel that your groups face those problems or other problems and you want to talk about it, let me know. Maybe there's an opportunity for another little side collaboration discussion. Okay, on that. And with that, that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Any quick questions for Maya? All right, definitely a lot going on there. So Eric Brown from SMUD's been off and on the Zoom. He wanted to participate more today, but again, his schedule's been challenging, but he and I continue to communicate, and we are going to get him here. So, but he's definitely working behind the scenes on lots of our pieces and elements of what we're doing. So he's definitely engaged. I do see that we have Mike Webb from PG on Zoom, so I will turn it over to Mike.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Do I get a thumbs up? Ken, you can hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, hey, I just give you a quick update. The public safety specialist team for PG&E are currently engaged in our annual safety and regulatory outreach with all of our first responder agencies, our law enforcement, fire, and OESs. For 2022, we did meet all of our wildfire mitigation plan commitments for El Dorado County, which include the vegetation management, the enhanced power line safety settings and public safety power shutoffs, and our hardening and undergrounding commitments. As those become more developed and more clear, just as last year, I'll look forward to doing that outreach with this group and sharing that information as we move through the springtime. The recent storm events impacted the county pretty hard. We had 6 separate impacts of 20,000 customers or more over 24 days during the storm. And our coordination and work with our local law, fire, and OES were pretty outstanding. And most of that, all of that was restored quickly and as safely as possible. So that was kind of a success here locally. As hard as we were hit, that was the second largest impactful storm to the PG&E and company history as far as the service territory. So it was a very busy winter or storm operation here. So I just wanted to get reestablished with the group here, starting through our spring outreach period. I'll put my contact information in the comments, and I'll look forward to hearing from all of you this spring and summer. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Mike. And we know you've been busy and taking care of stuff. So thanks for taking the time to come back with us, and look forward to seeing you more this spring. Looking online, I don't see Sergeant Bear from EDSO, but I do want to make sure we reach out to him or the Sheriff's OES office this spring, make sure we have some discussions. I know as we talk about prepping for fire season and the discussions with evacuations and movement to rave from Code Red, it would be a perfect opportunity to have an update from their program. So we can certainly talk to Sergeant Bear and Lieutenant Morton about having someone at one of our upcoming meetings. So with that takes us through our informational items. And I know we're up against the end of the meeting, or the scheduled end of the meeting. And I want to mention to all of our stakeholders and cooperators, obviously we're going to get into committee reports, and I know that we want to have some good discussion, particularly on grants and grant process. So you are welcome to stay, but also I don't think it'll offend any of us if you've got to move on to other meetings and take care of your own business. So please feel free to come and go as you need to. So item 8A, grants and funding. And so we have obviously Pat's got a committee report, and I think I'd like to start there. So that's our normal process. And then I think I would just like to open it up to some discussion about where we're at this year and have some dialogue kind of on where we think we want to go. And Pat's got some thoughts and some things we've been doing to look at that for all of you. So maybe Pat, let's just start with the report.
Okay, thank you. Our focus now is on executing the grants that we currently have. As you know, approximately $14 million in about 15 different grants in 11 different communities out of our 30 fire safety councils. So about a third of you have grant projects in work. As you can see from the projects report that the treasurer puts out, not a whole lot of progress on many of those things. So we need to move forward promptly to execute the projects we have in work. As many of you feel in this last grant cycle, like you were a Chinese spy balloon. So here's projects we think we'd like to apply for in the 23 cycle. And we said, no, hold on. And many of you thought that was shut down and the air went out of your efforts. Should not be the case. Please continue to develop the details of those projects so that we'll be fully ready to go forward in the next cycle, which I anticipate in December. In light of that discussion we had last month, we did some introspection and said, you know, you're right, we've evolved from the wild, wild west where we take all comers to maybe we need to be, have a better defined process and a more definitized way of selecting which grants want to go where, which funding, so which grants go to what funding source. And so Ken has created a special committee, and you want to talk more about that?
Well, it's sort of being created because we want participation and we want to open that up. And what Pat and I talked about, and we reached out and grabbed Paul Penn, our parliamentarian, who couldn't be here today because he's teaching a course in Reading. But Paul's agreed to step up and lead short-term, I guess, task force or work group, for lack of a better term, to really rebuild our grant application process for the Fire Safe Council, and under the lens of all the things that we're trying to talk about. Pat's addressing the volume of work that we're doing. We're trying to work up under this landscape with the other partner organizations. Every one of our partners that sit as part of the advisory committee have all asked us, how can you help us better coordinate and streamline the process? Because we're struggling with supporting, you know, the number of associate councils. Everybody's encouraging the councils that they're absolutely supportive that this is the right grassroots model, but it's just going forward. How do we do it in a way where we're looking at the 50,000 foot look and have this in a broader conversation? And it's not just with the associate councils. The Forest Service, you know, we talked about the meeting with Jacoby and the fuels team. Same piece. He has they have got some wonderful ideas about doing fuels treatment along the Wooey. But we needed to look at, well, where else are you going to be coming back and asking us to do work and partner? And we know there are other places, Strawberry and all kinds of communities. And so before we dive into any one effort and put our resources there, we want to see, what does the landscape look like, to make sure that we can all come back and make some decisions. And as I think everyone has been saying, everyone's kind of in a way of compete. We're starting to compete a lot amongst each other for these processes. And so in the grants and the workload and all of that. So this was a year that, and as Pat said, it was a bit of a, you know, the balloon going over that we had to really do a pause to take a look. And we made a commitment that we would look at all of these. And this was the first year where we took, and with you as the representative in the advisory committee, we took the proposals and had a discussion with the members of the advisory committee to say, how do these fit? We want to be able to work with our councils to see how we can support these, or put them in the place that they will be supported at the right time. And yes, it was a discussion that's never happened before, and a process that's never happened before, and a process that's not well baked. And I think, you know, I certainly own that. We own that from the executive board. But at some point we had to we were asked, as Hugh said, to be part of this at the table. Hugh sitting at the table as part of this advisory committee, helping shape where things are going. And so part of the trade-off is we're asking for their help, but at the same time, we have to be also a partner at the table to help find some of the solutions to the bigger challenges that all the agencies are facing. So circling back, we need to spend the time right now, this next year, fixing the process for all of you, so that, one, the playing field is well known, that when we walk into the next grant cycle, we fully understand what's expected of all of us, and that we're not changing the landscape, you know, in midstream, that we understand all of that. And I can't make that up from here, nor can Hugh or anybody else. And we really want it to be a representation of you who are out there living this, doing it, and understand the ups and downs of how this works. And so we asked Paul Penn if he would lead a short-term working group. I know he may be already reaching out to some folks to encourage some folks to participate, but we really want to build the process going forward. What do we expect individual associate councils to be able to supply in terms of a proposal? And not, and again, what's the scope? How do we refine all of that? And then how does this fit into this bigger lens of everything going on in the county, so that when we have our grants committee and we take in information from all of the councils, we've got all the information that's needed to be able to have discussion, share it with partners, and ultimately determine, the team where we should go in any given year. So that's what we're asking Paul to lead. I feel, again, Paul's not here, but he is asking for volunteers. And I know, like I said, I know he's reaching out to some folks individually because he's hoping to get sort of a cross section of folks. Again, not a large group, but really wants the folks to be able to build this and make some recommendations on what that looks like. So let's,
Well,
oh, great. If you want,
yeah,
good.
before we go on, I want to make sure everybody kind of gets a picture of what's happening to our county. Okay. This OWOPR group, it's new to the county. And as part of that, and as Ken said, I sit there representing you. As part of that, we got to remember, we're not just looking at fire safe council stuff now. We're looking at the entire county from the 5,000 or 50,000 foot level. So, but I do want to assure you, while I'm on that subject, that if you were to stop and back up and look at the org chart that we've shown you multiple times, you will notice that the Fire Safe Council is a equal player with CAL FIRE, the County Fire, RCD, Forest Service, and the county, and we're equal. So that I don't know if you realize that, but that's huge. That's a huge thing. And any of you that have been involved with other fire safe councils and other counties and other things like that, you realize that's a pretty big thing. And so I also want to tell you that having sat there with that group and talked about different things, the respect for you and what you have done in the past, and I'll give a lot of credit to Pat and to Steve and the way this group has worked in the past has gained, I can't tell you how many points you've gained with that. So please be assured that while things happen, remember that the plan that's being laid out, and it'll be much easier. I think it's going to be much better once everything is done and the plan is printed and people can look at that and look what the plan is for the county. I think it'll be much clearer, because in the past, and I'm no different. When I talk about Texas Hill, where I am, I want these grants just as bad as anybody else. But there may be some place in the county. Based upon information from people who know, CAL FIRE, the local fire authorities, the Forest Service, people who recognize the problems from a larger perspective than what I do just for Texas Hill. When they give that information, I may have to step back for a bit and say, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do a happy dance about that, but I recognize that there's a project somewhere else that when we go for grants that maybe is higher on the priority list than mine. Now, that doesn't mean mine isn't going to be there. It's going to be there, but it's still going to work. It's just not going to work as quick as maybe I'd like it to work. So, we have to recognize that. We're like, I tell people all the time, this is like trying to turn an aircraft carrier. If those of you that do, for so long, as a fire safe council, it's been, as we've said, hey, CAL FIRE wants grants, put out grants. I remember a couple of years ago, we had 17 grant proposals to CAL FIRE. We got one. The one we got, chipping, because that program, CAL FIRE's response to that was because that program covered more people could take effect or use that program than just one small area. So, be aware of that. And I will tell you that my goal is to ensure that the Fire Safe Council's position is well cemented into these task groups and these committees. So when I step back, that whoever is a representative from the Fire Safe Council is going to be cemented in, and you're going to be well represented in those committees from now on. So that's the goal. It's all brand new, just so you know. That's my take on it.
Chris.
So today's presentation spoke to the questions that were asked of Ron, spoke to where we are and what the future holds for us. We look at it from a very optimistic perspective. But the notion that an individual fire safe council has standing, I think that's misstated, and I'm gonna say why. There was a time, and you talked about history, where it was the case. You had some very talented individuals within respective fire safe councils that could make the effort to understand the process, and over time, maybe 2, 3, 4 cycles, you might get a grant. And that was the case with Patterson Ranch Fire Safety Council. Those days are gone. I think the success of Lester in bringing together multiple fire safety councils on a much bigger project certainly got the attention of CAL FIRE, continues to have the attention of us and the county. And it's kind of the future. But right now, I mean, we're seeing some of that evolution. We could take Texas Hill on an individual basis. It had great ideas about what it wanted to do, but it couldn't master it. And so by not being able to master it as an individual, started looking at Placerville Fire Safe Council, and on a broader perspective, things started moving, and now there's going to be some really good projects coming out of that Texas Hill interest. When you have people here who are beginners in this process and respectfully have an interest because of their area that they live in, I truly want to keep them engaged, because that's the grassroots that we can't lose. It's the roots of everything. But at the same time, I think it's important through this committee or process to make them understand that if they don't talk to others around them and pull something much larger together, that they're probably not going to be successful on an individual basis. I don't want to make everybody feel bad about that, because I'm feeling good that this is continuing to move forward. But I think my point is well-founded. And so I'd like to hear a response from you as to what I just said.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You bring up a good point, and you're not wrong. CAL FIRE has made it clear. The state fire marshals, CAL FIRE made it clear. They're not going to be funding small little grants. They want bigger projects. They want bigger projects to be done. Now, your point is where does that leave the little fire safe council? Okay. Well, let me explain something. And I think most of you already know, but if you don't, I'll try to clarify. Houses don't burn down because we don't do a huge shaded fuel break per se. Houses burn down because we don't clear around them and we don't harden. You know, I mean, shaded fuel breaks are there, but they're really a tactical thing for the fire authorities when we have a fire. You extend those and you make them bigger. So where does that leave us? Do you still need them? Yes, we do. But where I see this is my opinion, and I'm not shy about sharing it. My opinion is, where do the fire safe councils sit? The fire safe councils sit where you work with your local community. That's what you're there for. You're there to work with your homeowners to make sure that in the event of a fire, that you get them evacuated. How do I do that? I make sure that I do get grants, but I use those grants to clear along my roads in my fire safe council so people can get out of there. I also work on money now. CAL FIRE through OES and through AB 38 has now been required to allow grants for home hardening, which you didn't do before. Many of you remember you could do road clearance, but you couldn't get within 100 feet of a house. But now that's changed. So where do we as fire safe council, where do we really fit? I think we really fit is working with our individual homeowners, clearing our roads, hardening the homes in my community, getting the defensible space around every one of those homes in my community. That's my goal for Texas Hill. I'd like to get every home cleared, every home hardened, and every road out there cleared for evacuation. If I can do that, I've done my job. I worry about Mark and the RCD and CAL FIRE and the Forest Service and those guys telling me, where do we need those big shaded fuel breaks? Okay, I've had 40 years experience. I think I know in Texas Hill where we need one. I did the modeling. It's all there. It's laid out, ready to go, but it's not there yet. Okay, so, but we still need those, but that's not my responsibility, I don't think, per se, as a fire safe council. I leave that to CAL FIRE, the chiefs, and RCD and the Forest Service to look at that based upon the fire history and what their plan is, how they're going to fight these fires when they occur in that community. Where do they need them? Maybe it's not where I think they need it. So what do? Again, we go out and we work with the individual homeowners, sit down with them, complain and explain to them, this is why you need to clear your property. This is why you need to harden your home, because houses are burning down because of embers are burning them down and no clearance. But if you do that, I think we've done our job. That's my opinion. That's where I think we need to go.
So and definitely will defer to Heather. But I think what's happened in this process this year is it is crying uncle a bit. It's giving us a chance of pause, and it's not just because of Fire Safe Council capacity, but that's a huge piece of this. But it's also because it's crying uncle because our process isn't, our traditional process isn't fitting into what our partners are asking us to help with, facilitating, coordinating at this higher level. And it's not just CAL FIRE, and it's not just the Forest Service, it's Caltrans. They're reaching out now to the RCD, to the county, saying, how do we partner at the county level? Because we can bring funding and we can bring project work, we can bring resources to work along highways, including Highway 50. So they're all wanting that. We've got these opportunities, but we also have to demonstrate that we are, as individual as we are also together to be able to have a unified approach to helping make their lives easier and want to invest in our county. The problem is we don't have all the answers yet, and we all own that, right? And I think that's what Pat's asking, it's what I'm asking, that's what we want Paul to lead an effort to get you to help us build the process going forward under this new lens of understanding our own capacity internally and understanding how do we operate going forward, in the changing landscape of the challenges that we're facing that aren't the same as they were 10 or 15 years ago. So, Heather.
Well, first of all, this is a very contentious topic, so let's just agree on that. But I do want to let anybody who's involved with the office of wildfire preparedness and resilience, that whole process and that, county initiative or whatever you want to call it, I think everybody in this room highly wants to succeed, appreciates it, and everything. So my comments are very much in relationship to the grant cycle with this El Dorado County Fire Safe Council, and has absolutely no disparaging anything towards that group, because we all want it to succeed. And because I am very long-winded, I wrote my comments out so that it wouldn't be long-winded. Change can be hard. It's often uncomfortable to evolve through. I fear the organization that Pat and Steve built is losing the force it once generated. Achievements that grew out of grassroots community enthusiasm they supported and sustained. It is easy to follow an organization that fosters ideas, communicates collaboratively, and always tries to balance competition and competing projects with fairness. Change has occurred in a direction that does not foster community enthusiasm. This year's internal grant application process has been majorly flawed and disingenuous from the very beginning in many ways. How we were told grants would be evaluated for fiscal sponsorship was meaningless, and the policies provided by the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council policy weren't even followed. Proposing a quality project with all the stated elements required for a competitive fuels reduction grant made no difference, as with the Camino Fire Safe Council's grant. Was it landscape and size? Yes. Did it have substantial values at risk for infrastructure, industry, and the community? Yes. Did the scope support multiple fire safe councils? Yes. Did it have other agency support? Absolutely. Are there other competing fuel or completed fuel projects immediately in the area that it would enhance? Yes. Is there a real public safety threat to multiple communities? Yes. Would this project treat enough acres to change the fire behavior? Yes. None of this mattered in the end. Grant proposals were never evaluated through a competitive facts-based system. What happened to being for the greatest good? This council never wanted to take on new grants. And you just pretty much said that. Nor does it want more fiscal sponsorships. It doesn't have the vision to use grants fiscal sponsorship money to hire whatever it needs so fire safe councils can be successful. The evidence of that is in how both Grizzly and Camino have been jerked around in their efforts to just be allowed to submit a CCI grant application. I have heard Grizzly has found a pathway through the RCD. If that's true, congratulations, but I haven't confirmed it. The lack of a transparent, fair process is dangerous to the well-being of the El Dorado Fire Safe Council as a whole. This organization is currently being driven from the top down. The Camino Fire Safe Council was told what it was expected to support, which was an entirely different project miles away, which had no relationship to Camino. The fallout since then has been confusing, with changing expectations, none of which are reasonable justifications for not supporting the grant. So what has this caused in reality? What is left is a level of distrust that leads to people filling in the blanks for why and how grants process became so unpleasant. That's never good. That's how conspiracy theories get started. How is Grant and you advocating on behalf of the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council to promote fire safe projects before the Office of Wildfire Preparedness and Resilience Committee? How can you advocate for us when you don't even know what our project elements are? How can Ken represent the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council interests as he is a community paid staff coordinator for Oakford? That's a conflict of interest of being both their paid staff and our basic director. What motivated Ken to become the chairman of a community-based grassroots organization after he enjoyed the benefits of being a state director? Everything feels like coming from the top down, and our old grassroots seems to have gone away. And the worst thing that can come out of this is questioning motivations. Has Ken joining the Fire Safe Council, the El Dorado Fire Safe Council, and now becoming the Cold Whopper coordinator, just been a stepping stone on Ken's way to a second run for the District 2 supervisor? I don't know, but I ask. One doesn't become the director of CAL FIRE without understanding how to position oneself. The experience feels like being a pawn in someone else's game, and me not being a director anymore within the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council gives me the freedom to voice these hard questions.
Want me to answer?
Well, no, let me answer. I think this is a perfect opportunity. And first and foremost, Heather, I thank you for being willing to come and talk publicly and with me in the room. I know there's been a lot of innuendos and comments and things made without me present and not sharing it directly. And I don't think that's productive. A lot of people, rather than just come and have this conversation, have spent some time posting things on Facebook and making their own assumptions. And so I would throw back to the greater community. If we want to have a conversation, let's be professional about it and ask me, as opposed to putting things out there and stirring people up, because that's not how it works. So yeah, let me just start from the beginning and let me talk about me. I retired from CAL FIRE as the chief at the end of 2018 with a long, over almost 40 years working on fire and forestry related issues. I'm a registered professional forester. I'm a firefighter. I've been around the state in the northern and southern California. I've been on a lot of programs working with Fire Safe. I was part of the first Fire Safe Councils at the initiative around the state, working in Riverside and with staff in Sacramento. I've worked in pre-fire management, wrote the state's fire plan. This has been a passion of mine for my entire career, is to be engaged in this space. When I retired at the end of 2018, I was definitely ready to not be the director of CAL FIRE. I was ready to close that chapter, but I knew that I wasn't done. And yes, after some soul searching, thought, how can I continue to serve my community and the public? And a number of people encouraged, plus I had an interest in serving at the county level. And yes, I absolutely made a run for Board of Supervisor because I thought there would be a great opportunity to serve now the community where I live in. I've served the state. I've worked in different parts of the state. Now I can actually work where I live and plan to spend the rest of my life. Wasn't successful in the run. Learned a lot in the process. And I think what was probably most important, I learned a lot about the programs in the county and about the people here in the county and where my best value could truly be. And it was literally Steve and Pat and many others that reached out to me and said, can you help us bring the organization to the next level? We know things are changing. We know the landscape is changing. Was the county's Board of Supervisors asking, would you please help engage with us? It was the CAO, it was many others saying, would you use your experience and background? We need help. Yes, I could easily, and I would some days would much prefer to be sitting on my property, burning piles and doing the things that I would enjoy doing there. But no, I stepped out of that to come back and help with that. There is zero agenda to run for Board of Supervisors. There is zero agenda to do anything other than help us figure out how to go forward using skill sets and tools and trying to help figure out how we navigate the landscape that isn't going to look like it was 15 or 20 years ago. No, it's not easy. And no, it's not always, we learn and we change course. But I can tell you, sitting in the group, everybody wants to find a way that we ensure that the fire safe councils are the voice of the community, that we never lose that initiative. So when the Board of Supervisors commissioned that working group, I wasn't part of that decision, but the CAO and others reached out and said, we're putting this organization together. We want the Fire Safe Council to be at the table, as Hugh said. So it started out with me representing we can go back to the minutes. I've been reporting on that from the beginning. I sat at the table along with Ron, along with the forest supervisor, along with the unit chief for CAL FIRE and the fire chiefs, and with Mark as the RCD. As this was evolving, it was very clear that there was a lot of work to do here and a lot of interest to have an organization. So the county reached out and said, well, to be honest with you, I'll be frank, we talked about grants. I talked about it with Pat and Chuck. We actually put forward a proposal for Pat or for Chuck to go to work for El Dorado County as a consultant to work on FEMA grants. That's not the option where the county went, but literally Chuck was my first choice to work on the FEMA grant and be part of the county structure as a consultant because of his background and what he would bring to the table. I don't know why that's not the direction that they chose to go. Shortly thereafter, the county reached out and said, because of your experience, would you help us facilitate the working group to try to bring these folks together? As soon as I realized that was happening, I can't represent the Fire Safe Council in the working group and be the facilitator for the county. So Hugh stepped in, and again, we've talked about this from the beginning. Hugh has been that representative. I'm facilitating the working group. And offline, I'm working as a retired annuitant I'm not under a large consulting, I'm in the big picture, I'm losing money on this proposition because I could be consulting and I've turned down national. That's not what I'm about. I'm interested in working with my community, but the amount of hours it's taking, for doing the county piece to try this infrastructure, I had to tell my wife I'm getting something for it. But But the benefit, honestly, so Hugh has stepped in from the beginning, but the benefit has been, I'm sitting there and I'm hearing what's going on and what you're all saying, and then I'm also over here listening to what the county's trying to do. And you can believe me or not, but I will, the interest by Sue Henneke and the folks at the county to try to build this relationship with the Fire Safe Council. She said, how do we do more? How do we help facilitate? Yeah, I've been throwing out ideas is how does the county help staff the Fire Safe Council so that we don't have to hire somebody, but we can figure out how they can process the zillions of invoices Janet's doing right now, because what's happened is the rat is going through the snake. And the rat right now is bulging because all the projects are starting to do work and now all the billing's coming. And the workload in doing the billings is skyrocketing, the reporting, all that. We knew this was coming. Pat's been lining us up for this for a while. He's going to be stepping down. That's no secret. And so we're trying to figure out how does the model look that we do it the right way. And so we're constantly pushing the county to add, how can we have a different relationship that provides a longer term support mechanism. So the value in kind of being sort of having a foot on each side is I'm hearing both sides and I'm communicating the information, but there's nothing fiscally in it. There's no decisions that are being made. The county isn't driving or the county didn't make the decisions to pick grants. The county just facilitated this opportunity to bring the partners together to have the discussion. The process is not right. The process isn't working yet. I will be the first to tell you. Bingo. And so we literally are at that spot where we have to fix it. But the positive side is we have an opportunity to fix it right now. But it's not coming from me. I need you, the group, to fix it. I mean, to come up with the recommendations with sort of the sideboards, if you will, or here's the playing field. Here's what the partners need from us. How then do we come up with a process that everybody understands, that we follow through from the beginning to the end? We did take what was given to us through the grants committee. That's what Hugh took to the advisory committee. So we had some information, we had that information to work on, but clearly we didn't have everything that we should have. And I know there was frustration there because we don't have a good standard for asking everybody, make sure you have an amended sort of draft scope of work. There's criteria that we should be asking for, so we're all kind of able to evaluate projects and have a discussion with the same set of information. We don't have any of that. Plus, you're at a disadvantage nobody really knows what the bigger playing field is right now. Trying to figure that out.
Very clear on what you thought would make a good progress. So I think, both of us did try, Grizzly, I don't know who else, I think Lester might have thought about it, but I do think you guys were clear initially on what elements would make a good project. The breakdown largely came in, there was no process to present our projects. That would be huge going forward. If you're going to be the advocate that, because we are part of OWOP or whatever you call it, we are, but we have to have a real shot at presenting quality projects. And what you just said, you don't even want that to be part of our council, so I don't think you're the right advocate.
No, I don't. No, I don't think that's what I said. And if I said that, then I was wrong. I think you certainly should submit projects. All I'm saying is, I'm thinking some of the projects you should think about are more, have a more direct effect on the people that you are working with within your fire safe council.
Ours,
Okay.
Wait,
First of all, let me back up. Ken told you a little bit about where he came from. Let me tell you about where I come from. I spent 40 years playing the game, 30 of those years with the state fire marshal, director of operations when I left there, part of the committee, vice chair of the committee that wrote Chapter 7A, all about the home stuff. Did fire protection engineering for a big portion of that time, was a big player in writing some of the test standards, the initial test standards for all of this stuff, your decks, your siding, all of that sort of thing. Worked with Steve Qualls early on in do some stuff. So if I seem to be leaning a little bit toward home hardening and defensible space, yeah, I am. Because that's where you're gonna save houses. And so that's just from my history, that's it, you know? So if I go that way, so all I'm trying to say, yeah, you have all the right in the world to put in for big shaded fuel breaks, do those kind of things you want to do. Go ahead and do that. But I'm trying to tell you that I think the people that have a better idea where those kinds of projects need to be might be other players on OWOPR that have something to say about that. Maybe CAL FIRE, maybe the local fire authority, maybe the Forest Service. And where I'm saying you still put in for grants, but put in for grants for do some roadside clearance, put in for grants to get some money to help your people in your fire safe community harden their homes or to get defensible space around those homes. There's a $25 million grant coming to the city of Placerville or the greater Placerville area for exactly that. There's not a dime in that for shaded fuel breaks. It's all about home hardening and defensible space because somebody beyond me, beyond you, and in part of AB 38 actually, has said, when they wrote that bill, said maybe that's kind of important to do. So I'm saying, yes, go ahead and look at the Highway 50 project. I agree with you. That needs to be done. I totally agree with you on that. I'm just saying that maybe there's some other projects or things that you can do initially. That doesn't mean that project would never be done, but initially things you can do to better prepare your homeowners and help your homeowners that need help. That's what our job is. I don't, you know.
Just a point of order.
Yeah.
We're after 11:30. I think it was very clear, people that wanted to stay should stay.
Correct.
And I see some of the stakeholders still here. So I'm worried about them. So I thought maybe, because I believe both of you had your chance to respond to these queries. That's the way I see it, query. Where are we going?
Okay, so.
Am I gonna do my report?
Yes. So here's what I'd like to propose is that, and which is why we put on the table. We have an opportunity to work through, first of all, Heather, your points are well taken and I mean, and well received, and I appreciate it. But it's not, I don't want it to be dropped here, right? Knowing we're at a time constraint, which is why we want a process to where we can spend some time working through this. And we've asked Paul Penn, who's got some capacity, to lead an effort. And we can report back to the group and we can address these issues. You know, we'll work on it until we get it fixed. We have a lot of work to do. The point being is, I hear you. You're put a pin in that particular project. And just as I told Dorothy, everybody that was in that advisory committee thought it's a good project. There wasn't one person in there that didn't think it's a good project. It was about timing, capacity, and possibly other resources to bring to bear to get the job done that may or may not require applying for a grant. So what it left everybody feeling, well, maybe we need to talk about this more, but nobody left there thinking that that project wasn't going to get implemented. So I guess I want every one of those projects that Pat put on the table had an offer, had a place to go to get resolved. Maybe not where everybody thought it would go originally, but there were opportunities, and the commitment was and continues to be to find a place for every one of those proposals to get worked on. It just may not be in the traditional places that we have been seeing it. And that's what we've got to work on. So to put a pin in this piece, and we'll talk more, Paul's going to be reaching out. If you're interested in being part of the group to rewrite this process and have this discussion, reach out to Paul Penn directly, and he'll be reaching out to folks, and he'll be back in here again at the next meeting. So with that, I want to switch to Governance Committee, 8B. Anything new, Karen, there?
Just one thing real quick.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's not a big deal. Thank you for clarifying, Ken, about the endorsements, because that was not my intention to endorse anyone. I just had not had anything other than personal contact to give out. So just to clarify too, we do not endorse. Like you said, that's policy is part of what my governance is. We don't endorse measures, tax measures, anything that's divide the communities and all that. So I just wanted to thank you for pointing that out and say, sorry.
That's fine.
Jumped on that one. Do you want me to just do new councils real quick?
Yep,
Or,
yep, go right to new councils as well.
So new
9D.
council, just real quickly, Fort Jim is looking to reestablish a fire safe council. I'm going to be speaking at their meeting tonight. And tomorrow Greenstone, who is one of our newer fire safe councils, I'm speaking at their meeting tomorrow night. So, or tomorrow morning rather. So I'll give you an update next month on those two items.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions? Moving on. I know Pat had to leave, but chipping program, actually, if you could just talk about, Jessica, about both chipping and defensible space programs together. Oh, sorry.
So,
Bring the mic to you.
oh.
Darn mic, just to taste this.
Yes, the monthly report for January. January, we completed 30 jobs for chipping. We still have a lot of. I'm losing track of words, but we could use more jobs. If people need the work done, we could do the work. I've talked to 3 different councils on community events. Those that were interested in community events, just give me a call. I'm coordinating with the contractors, scheduling for each community to have up to 2 weeks to get their entire community service. But you have to have your residents apply online individually. And on the nearest cross street section, you're going to put a 3-letter acronym for your specific council. REE is obviously REE, Logtown Council is LTC. Contact me and we will figure out a 3-letter acronym for your council that you can attach to each individual application that you submit. And I can create reports specifically for your council. And I'm starting it. I can date it back to the beginning of the year since we just started. So if that's what you guys want, I can do that and I figured out a way. Moving forward with defensible space. Defensible space is going really well. We've only had to close 5 applications so far out of 120. We have about, I want to say like 30 evaluations that have been completed so far. We're going to start tasking out to contractors. And please, if you are encouraging people to apply for defensible space, I'm going to urge that you make it clear to them that upon application submission, their property needs to be ready to be evaluated and serviced. We are not taking days, 6-7 months out into the future to work for them when they want us to. If they're going to apply, they are stating that they are ready to be serviced immediately. If they are not ready, I'm going to close out their application. Other than that, we're doing great.
One question,
Oh.
a while back, and I may have been brought up in the meeting, but we had a training process for defensible space evaluators.
Yes,
Yeah, we will update you later. We had a whole, we talked for an hour about that. Yeah.
I do have a question related to your report. First of all, excellent report, but you're new.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that comes, you're learning, you're still learning. And I can say that, it's tough for you to say that. But the way I see it, and this goes back to Hugh's comment about what makes him tick, what makes him feel good, is defensible space and home hardening. So this question of defensible space as a separate, like we're handling it right now, you as a separate thing, I think we're missing the boat on trying to tie it in a different way. Try to tie it so it's more complete. And I think we'll learn as we're going forward now, based on our discussion today. But at the same time, we got this functioning effort, which doesn't get into all of the things that you, so I think it's missing a piece, and I don't know how to do that, but I would stall, dumping anybody or stall working on things if we're not doing a broader explanation to the parties. Does that make sense?
No. No, can you restate that, please,
Yeah.
Chris?
What, I would,
I'm gonna back up. Defensible space alone is not enough anymore. Our program is set up as defensible space. But because we're talking about home hardening as being a important element, defensible space doesn't give you the success alone. It doesn't. So I don't want people being part of the program, getting a certain piece of the total and not getting the whole thing. Because why are we even functioning that way?
So I'll address it, then I think we're gonna move on, but yes, we're totally going that way. I think that we're the training, all of it, the education is all trending that way. But we've got evaluators and inspectors out there. They will be back out there again in just a month or two, talking to homeowners, and they need resources to give to seniors, veterans, and others. At the end of the day, getting defensible space done is better than not getting anything done. So we want to continue to support our defensible space and chipping programs within our framework now, and then we will evolve down the road once we understand what the pilot program will give us an opportunity to understand. How do we reach homeowners from the home hardening piece? But we're not there yet. But we've got support from Title III funding from the county and others to really ramp up our efforts to help seniors and veterans and low income to get these space done.
That's the response to my question.
Okay.
But I want her to hear this dialogue a little bit so she can understand when she might get questions about home hardening, that may be part of the overall story in the end, but not right now.
Thank you. We'd have just said that would have been easier. Wouldn't have to do it that way, but yeah, absolutely. Are any other questions for Jessica?
No.
All right, outreach and education, Alice.
Did have a few things I want to say. Now I've lost my voice. Perfect. Okay, coming back to what you had said. If any of you have education experience or you like public speaking, please step forward and say, yes, I'd love to be part of that trainer. Because we want to get some people who enjoy public speaking or, are used to teaching, so that to kind of make that course interesting. So tell anybody if that's something you're interested in. That was the March 30th and 31st one. Because there is room for, another couple of people. And we're also hoping to spread it through the county so you get, kind of experts in different places. Janet has been working with me really nicely, trying to get information to make a speaker list. So thank you for all who have responded to her. And if you've had some speakers that you know about, let us know. We want to keep growing that list and keep a nice list that people can use to tap into for their community meetings. And the same way, Elizabeth had a great idea. We were talking about creating a similar list of really good videos. Then maybe we can even have a flash drive for people who don't have good internet, so we can also be using our community. So if you see a video that, wow, that's really a good video, you're 10 minutes of really, that'd be great for a meeting. Let Elizabeth know or let me know. So because we're gonna start a list of that too, try to get to. The Foothill Fire Flash did go out since the last meeting. If you didn't get it, this was the one having to do with this fire severity hazard map. Please let me know. I keep surprising how many people say, oh, we got the fire flashes done, got that. Now either they got it, they didn't read it, which is fine. But yeah, I do have a thing in the back. If you didn't get it, then put your email on there if you'd like to get that county newsletter. Trying to keep kind of communication going between all the fire station councils, the agencies, and that's our way to do that right now. There is a separate room now officially at the office down on Main Street. A whole separate room with just things for you to borrow. I've just about finished the inventory now, and I have pictures of what it is. This is what this looks like, the size of this, and so I'm going to be sending that out to every chair. So hopefully by next week you'll get that. And there's really easy parking there. So if an event's going to come up, you want to borrow that stuff. I can even, if you need help getting it set up, I'm often willing for an hour around to help you with that, even if I'm not necessarily there at your event. But what we need to do is have a calendar, because it could be that, two fire state councils are counting on that and got their event on the same day and they both want 3 pop-ups or something. So Harry pointed out to me, which I didn't even realize, that on the website, there's an event calendar. And so apparently we can all go on to there and actually put something on there. So let's get the March 18th one on, our March 25th one at Oak Hill. When Grizzly Flat gets theirs, they can put that on there. So hopefully let's all start using that event calendar to keep track of. And again, if two fire safety councils do have an event on the same day, that's not necessarily a deal killer. We'll just have to coordinate as who needs what. Oh, and the way this is gonna work too is that Carrie is usually in the office from Tuesday and Thursday, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, 9:30 to 12 or 12:30,
Yeah.
about that. So that you can kind of count on that usually, but it's always a good idea, even like a week ahead of time, if you're counting on picking up all the stuff that you could connect with her. You know, she's got that outreach, no, not outreach, on mail. She's admin,
Yeah.
she's clerk, sorry.
The door's locked otherwise.
Stores look pretty. And and if you do get there and there's a little bell you ring, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, so you can ding on the door and you go to the area. And that's it, thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Alice. All right, thank you, Alice. Community council reports, anything that the individual councils that we haven't talked about already. I think we got David first and then,
So,
Nope. I think we had David first and then you, oh, sorry.
March 18th, 9 to 3, Midtown Mall, wildfire preparedness event. I think that Hugh and Karen are gonna be there. And we'll have lots of, Smokey Bear and Captain Gallagher, so it's a good group there. So hopefully we'll get some support. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Paul.
Thank you. So a week from today, on the 27th, the Greater Cameron Park Area Fire Safety Council will be hosting its third in a series of 5 forums on wildfire resiliency. This one, we're going to be specifically explaining how you set up your set aspects from Ready, Set, Go, and put together a plan, your communication plan, your evacuation plan. That's when you're told to go. So the previous 2 were a 3D demonstration of wildfire in a sandbox in our community. And I would strongly encourage the other councils. It's a good way to get public engagement because they can actually see how fire will behave in their neighborhood. And we ran the scenario to say if defensible space was here, here's how it would slow it down versus no defensible space and how it would go faster. And that was an eye opener for people. We had about 70 people attend that event. It's proven to be good community outreach. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Paul. What's going on there?
And we're gonna do the sandbox too, Paul.
All right. Any other in the room, any other fire safe council reports? Okay,
Yeah, I
looking
have one,
online.
if you can hear me.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, respective members of the board, associate and satellite fire safe councils. Real quick, I'll make this as brief as possible. The Texas Hill Fire Safe Council would like to invite extending this invitation to their first community event on Saturday, the 25th from 9 to 11 a.m. And with that said, we have the huge opportunity to having Ernie Laurie present to us lessons learned and his PowerPoint presentation from the Caldor fire incident. If you'd like to go, I know Janet's there also. We know Hugh's there. Just reach out to them and RSVP. Thank you. I yield back to Chair Ken Pemlott.
Thank you, Tim. I'm sorry, what?
Where's the event?
It's gonna be in Town Hall.
That'll be at the Placerville Town Hall at 549 Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And I'm looking online and just from Michelle Wirt at Omo Ranch, March 4th from 9 to 3, a community chipping day. The chipper will be set up at a property that was heavily affected by the Caldor fire. So again, that's March 4th, and reach out to Michelle if you've got questions about that. I'm not seeing any other comments or input online and nothing else in the room. So we have no old business. So from there, we'll go to item 12, project reports so far, Tamara and or David.
He's not listening.
Okay, we'll move right past it then. Yes, we're late, Dave, so we're not gonna spend a lot of time waiting. An update from so far. Brief.
Sorry, Shannon.
Let me do.
Why don't we go to chipping? Yeah, biomass.
Okay. So, I got a report from Greg Stanton. He's the county's biomass cogeneration lead. SPI's Camino. The Board of Supervisors approved a contract with TSS Consultants to perform a fatal flaw analysis on the site. TSS will likely produce a first draft report within the next 60 days. That's SPI Camino. This is for those of you who haven't heard me before, for biomass plants or co-generation. Okay, the next one is SMUD Moat Hydrogen was awarded a $500,000 planning grant by the California Department of Conservation. Planning phase includes site selection for the project. Greg's working with the El Dorado County Economic Development Department to put forward appropriate potential project locations for SMUD's consideration. Next one, Black Oak Mine Unified School District. Meeting with the school district next week to discuss resubmittal of the CAL FIRE grant next month. That was the school district directly being involved with biomass cogeneration. And then the final one is the Gold Seal Industries mobile biomass unit. First unit demonstration project, anticipated deployment second quarter 2024. Gold Seal Industry is a technology company that manufactures and manages the ultimate conversion system, waste conversion to energy with zero emissions and zero waste. Essentially, they have proprietary, or whatever that word is, rights to a certain process, and they've made it into a modular mobile so that it can be moved to different places. So that's what they're doing. That's the conclusion of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So David's focus on so far. If you have specifics for Chris, you can talk to him offline if it's relative to updating him on biomass.
All right. Our rats, I'm sorry, using for further extension. The question so far, at 11 o'clock, the biomass group meets, and at 1 o'clock, the landscape vision, and okay. And I can't find the general meeting that there's going to be one in March.
And then what about RAP?
RAP and RAP. RAP is United Policyholders has a website that they're creating and is supposed to be interactive with each county. And each county can compare what they're doing to the other counties, and that's a work in process. RAC, Resource Advisory Committee, is meeting March 1st at 3:30. I don't think we will have a quorum. I don't think we're gonna accomplish much out there, but I think, did that one get canceled?
I thought it was.
I thought there was another.
Well, we can look that up and get the information out to folks.
Is that it?
That's awesome.
All right, thank you. And thank you for staying engaged on that, David and Chris, on the biomass. Item 13, public comment. Anything from the public that hasn't already been covered?
Yeah, hey, Mr. Pemlot, real quick, I'd like to add to the Texas Hill community event on the 25th. There's going to be free coffee and donuts there.
Outstanding. Hey,
So there you go.
that's where it's going, just like that. All right, Alice has a comment.
Yeah, I want to make a good bid too. I also just want to thank, goodness, I want to thank Ken and you for all of the Fire Safety Council. Because I understand Heather's frustrations. I know that there were frustrations with what went on with grants. I think there's just a small part of everything that's going on. You know, with our Fire Safety Council, we do feel there's really strong grassroots support still from the Fire Safety Council. And I just want to say I really appreciate it. You guys have done.
Thank you. Looking online, other comments? David, can it be like 3 seconds, please?
Mother Lowe's Lions Club, and it's part of the Elder Forest Forum, and his high school kids are Washington Foresters are presenting the project.
Outstanding. Yeah, thank you for that. That's good. Paul?
Yeah, so this Saturday, there is Battle of the Badges. It's a chili cook-off event with nearly all the local fire agencies and other first responders. It's at the fairgrounds. It starts at 4 o'clock, goes till 8. And I'm a judge, but if anybody could give me some advice, you fire guys, on what I should eat beforehand to cool the stomach would be great.
All right, thank you, Paul. All right, so item 14, go to the order. Essentially, next meeting is March 15th, right here at 9:30. And again, as I indicated, we'll have the senior community come present on the Commission on Aging. Again, thank you all. And again, thanks for your patience for the extra hour. Have a good day. Meeting adjourned.
All right, thank you, everybody.